if you work really hard at trying to eradicate the narcotics problem, then things will not change, because it's a giant wheel spin. But if you stop trying, it can absolutely get worse. Everything you see in the movies is exactly how it worked. You know, I was the long-haired kid that was constantly harassed by the police, and I was going to be damned if that's the way I behaved. And at that moment, I thought, man, kicking indoors and working undercover would be something that I really felt confident that I could do. A lot of the poorer communities were minority communities, but every person that I was going to was a Crip. He pulls a gun, shoves him up against the wall, and shoves a gun in his mouth. He's freaking bleeding all over the place. Then it was time for the roundup, which was the worst part.
Who's interviewing who here?
I'm sorry, am I allowed to ask questions? Sorry.
I'm busting your balls. That's the cop in you, right?
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome my next guest to the podcast. He's a 13-year veteran of the Fort Worth Police Department in narcotics and gang units specifically, a homicide cold case and F.B.I. violent crimes task force participant. He's the brains behind Operation Fishbowl, which his book is pretty heavily detailed in. He's sentenced 50-plus Crips to 625 years in prison, so I'm sure they're a big fan of yours.
Love me.
Recipient of the U.S. Attorney Commendation Award, the Fort Worth Police Department Officer of the Year, and nominated for F.B.I.'s Overall Case of the Year. Also happens to be a musician, an author of Life in the Fishbowl, and the founder of Tactical Systems Network. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Tegan Broadwater. Thank you for coming. It's nice having you relatively in town. I know DFW is quite expansive, and it's still a bit of a drive, but I appreciate you giving us your time today. I know you're a busy guy. Your name also kind of sounds like a porn star name. I got to be honest.
It's supposed to be rock star, but yeah, close enough. 4-letter
Maybe
words.
It's interchangeable. I could do both. What's the last full book that you read?
Last full book was Gladwell's The Revenge of the Tipping Point. I guess his Tipping Point was one of his first books. Must be 20 years old now.
Oh wow!
And I really enjoy his kind of view of how socially things happen, you know, the point at which people act in a certain way as a group, and society makes changes from anywhere from, you know, crime waves to, you know, the way people behave in smaller groups to the way you see, you know, the nation acting, you know, today. But he presents it in really cool stories, which I like. He's a super like really observant and descriptive guy, but he leverages stories to get through it. It reminds me a little bit of, not necessarily in terms of the authorship, but, you know, the Gift of Fear, you know, the stuff that, you know, the Becker book was a scientifically based concept, but all of it was based around these stories that he went and, you know, broke down. I think it's so much of an easier read for grunts, you know, to get the point.
Do you find that in your line of work, specifically like other guys that you worked with, that from a extracurricular standpoint that they would do reading like that to try to better understand what they're up against?
Man, I certainly hope so. I know it's something that I did when I was, you know, I wanted to be working narcotics and undercover like from the jump. So, you know, it takes a white stiff a while to get that position. So, you know, that's all I did was, you know, read nonfiction books about how other people had done it and their frame of mind. And, you know, everybody does things differently. So it gave me a breadth of knowledge about how people had accomplished things like that. I think people are readers or they're not, honestly. And, you know, cop work, and I've been out of cop work for some time now, but I mean, I think people just take a trend, take their training, and go do what they do. I think there needs to be more creativity in it. So I think it would really help if people would do their own research like that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's no different than practicing shooting or grappling or, you know, staying in shape, recovering properly. I mean, all of the things that are going to make you better at your job, which those are kind of more obvious, I think.
They are, but I mean, even in police work, you know, you're going through a 7-month academy or whatever, but after that, it's kind of up to you. Yeah. They maintain a shooting qual every year, but I mean, it's basic. They still have people failing it, but it's kind of like, hey, if you're going to be a guy that works the mats all the time, or the guy that goes to the range all the time, it's kind of your thing. It's just whatever you want to leverage your time for, but there's really no accountability beyond trusting people are going to do that.
The bare minimum standard, would you say it's inadequate?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's getting less and less adequate as time passes.
Wow.
I mean, it used to have the goofy PT test even to get in. I mean, even that's laughable now. Most places don't have one. If they do, it's so easy that it's a negligible part of the experience.
Do you think that that's just because numbers are down and they're trying to bring as many people in as they can?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I've often had talks with guys who are in the training academies and stuff, and I had done some stints in there doing the training and stuff too, and it always politicked for fitness tests should be, recurring, but you get into this civil service and then there's this big bubble of protection that also won't allow you to require these fitness tests over long periods of time. It's all they can do to keep the shooting quals up. And I think, it's necessary, but I'm not really sure. I'm not sure if standards are dropping because of the new generations or because there's shortages. I mean, there's far fewer people now want to be cops than, when I was growing up. Sure.
I don't blame them. Shit, I wouldn't want to do it.
Me either.
Yeah.
Me either.
Yeah.
I'm glad I did it when I did, because I would not be a happy camper right now.
Yeah. What's something you wish you were better at?
Okay, so if you'll allow me some levity to say, wish you were better at, I will distinguish between wishing and wanting. So, if I wanted to be better at something, you could assume that I'm taking at least incremental steps to getting better, practicing a guitar or whatever. So my wish would be to be a little bit more computer literate, programish, mathematics. I feel like, as much as we're moving into a modern age, AI and all that kind of stuff, I see all kinds of stuff sailing over my head.
Right.
And, but it's also not something I'm passionate about. So that's why I would wish it, because I just have no desire to learn it. At some point, I have to learn to be functional, within business and everything else. And I am trying to stay on trend, but man, it's just really not my thing.
But it moves so fast, like it's a full-time job just trying to stay relevant with.
I'm the old man kicking the can. I know.
Yeah. If time travel were possible, where and when would you go and why?
All right. So I've thought about this. So if you would know better than I that, humans are able to withstand some intense things that you maybe didn't know how resilient you could be, but it's, in short stints. So going back too far, I would caution myself, because I'd be looking for the central heat and air and in the romantic period in the Wild West or something, where it's just, you're roughing it every single day. So, I'll raise my hand and say I'm a brat. Yeah, I don't know if I would want to go back and live amongst that. And the future, for the same reason we just discussed, I think is, man, everything compounds. Every year we're getting 10x the intelligence level, and the robotics are coming and everything else. So I'd almost be scared to look ahead 50 years or something like that. I don't even recognize what we're doing maybe, and so my answer might be boring, but, I grew up through the 70s, but I was young, and I think there's a lot of cool qualities about the 70s, not just the nostalgia, but I think the political banter was a lot more civilized. I think music in the late 60s and early 70s was fantastic. And just an interesting culture coming out of the 60s into the 70s trend. I would love to just be there and compare my recollection as a little kid with what it really was. As an adult, you just see things through a different lens. So I would enjoy doing that, and I'd still have air conditioning, so I'd be happy.
Hey guys, I wanted to take a minute to tell you about the Mic Drop Patreon, where you can get the real mic drop experience the way it's meant to be seen. You get completely uncensored, unfiltered, and uncut episodes with nothing held back, just raw, real conversations directly from me to you, without YouTube censorship. Plus, you'll see it days before anyone else, with early premieres and exclusive bonus content that you won't find anywhere else. You get behind-the-scenes access to the show, including pre- and post-show footage, with me and the guest both in studio and on location, depending on what the guest is into and what we have going on. On top of that, we've got tons of Patreon-only perks, mic drop swag, access to exclusive merch, and the chance to submit your questions to be asked at the end of every episode. You'll also get a sneak peek at our upcoming guests, so you'll know who's in the studio weeks before anyone else. We're constantly releasing new features and dropping new content based on what you want to see. For our top tier members, you get the same mic drop challenge coin that all of my guests receive from the upcoming show, which will never ever be for sale. We've got quarterly merch that's sent out directly to you, a monthly Zoom call with me where we talk about whatever you guys want to talk about, and an active group chat where we all shoot the shit on a daily basis. All of that for just a few bucks a month to support the show. Right now, we're also offering a 10% discount off an annual subscription, which means that you get more than a free month. I want to say thank you to everyone who has already signed up. Your support means that we get to keep bringing you the content that you love. So if you haven't yet, hit the link in the description or go to patreon.com/micdrop and join the team. I'll see you guys in there. Thank you. When hunting isn't about hunting at all, Team Dog features comprehensive and customizable meal plans with dry and raw food options to meet your dog's unique nutritional needs, including digestive sensitivities, allergies, or selective eating. Did you know combining 75% dry food with 25% raw food delivers robust, nutrient-dense meals for your dog? Be your dog's hero with Team Dog. Speaking of music, I know you're a musician. I just wanted to ask quick, was there a singular band that was an influence or a motivation for you to get into it?
Man.
Led Zeppelin?
Led Zeppelin is what actually pushed me to get better, because I think I think that's widely accepted, and that's, might be a little boring answer, but I'll be honest. When I decided I wanted to be a musician at such an early age, that Kiss was the thing.
Yeah.
So, when if you're in grade school and Kiss Alive 2 comes out 77 or whatever, it's about the time that Elvis left and Kiss came in. And so any kid at that time was just mesmerized by it. So that was my plan. I was going to be the next drummer of Kiss or whatever.
Kiss boots and a fucking face paint job, right?
Yeah. My parents weren't too proud of that, but it never happened anyway. So it's all right.
Oh, look where it got you. Do you have a favorite quote?
My favorite quote is, "Be ashamed to die until you've won some victory for humanity." And that's a Horace Mann quote. I'm not really good at memorizing quotes, but that's one that when I'm speaking or whatever, I always leverage, because I think guys get as old as me and then they finally discover the value of giving to others is almost better than bettering yourself in some cases.
Yeah.
You have to focus on bettering yourself. And I know I just try to speak to younger people and say, man, the sooner you can realize that, the more the key to life gets open. Because if you're motivated by bettering yourself, there's nothing wrong with that. But once you see outside of that and you actually make it part of your life's goal to help other people in some form or fashion, it's an amazing experience.
Do you have a less heavy or deep quote? Shit happens.
Yeah, not really. No, I don't even have any common sayings that I say all too often.
I think one of my favorites is, what you do speaks so loud I can't hear what you say. Because talk is so fucking cheap. And
Amen.
Especially in politics, like people say, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And, it's like, well, what have you actually done?
Yeah. You got to put something on a platform.
Yeah. I imagine being a former undercover guy and busting gangs and what have you, you are an EDC guy. Do you carry all the time? Yeah,
and I'll be boring there too. So I'm not actually a gun enthusiast. I carry a knife all the time. I used to train with knives a lot, so I have a deep respect for the knife. Although I'm not into brands of Kershaw's and Gerber's, whatever. When you train with knives, you learn that kind of any knife is going to do a lot of damage.
Anything sharp will fuck somebody up.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then pistol wise, it's not a maintenance thing for me, but I carry a 5-shot 380 with some plus Ps.
Really?
There's a little hidden hammer. Yeah. It's the same thing I used to use in my undercover days.
Yeah.
And I think the primary, I have full size weapons, but I think the main reason that I do that is because I have almost no excuse not to carry it. And when I've got a full size cig or something, I find myself so many times stashing it or, not carrying it properly as I would it be intended. And I thought, well, when you have no excuse, then, that little hidden hammer is so small.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I will say to the maintenance component, I agree. And like, I've got a couple little, I put 357s in them, which is not easy to shoot in a small frame like that.
But right.
A hammerless J frame. But I do like the fact that like you can leave that motherfucker sit there for 5 years. You don't have to worry about the springs in the magazine fucking up or, it's like it's just tried and true go-to, kind of gun. But
and not being the enthusiast again, like I said, I don't mind cleaning guns and all that stuff. It's just for whatever reason, for the industry that I ended up in, I was just not an enthusiast. I was green as ever, and they taught me how to shoot, and I think that's why I was a good shot, because I really had no experience, so I just learned how to do it properly the first time. But it just never. It's always been something I consider necessary, but it's never been something I do recreationally, honestly.
Yeah. Do you have it on you now?
I have it stowed, but I don't have it on me.
Do you keep a blade on you all the time?
I do.
Can I ask what you have on right
it's
now?
This is a little Kershaw clip, and it's it's a flip knife still, but it's got a lock. I don't usually like folding knives that have a lock either. And I used to carry sheathed fixed blades, even in patrol, because I was training so much. It wasn't necessarily an authorized weapon, but I would always keep something that I could get to real quick, either from pulling out the front or off of the the collie Filipino style, off the back of the shirt. But I always thought, man, in an exigent circumstance, I'd rather lose my job than my life. So that was just one of my backups.
Yeah, fucking Braveheart over here pulling the battle axe out of your back.
It was at the time. Yeah. Again, I've settled enough.
Yeah,
but
I will say I've been carrying this for a few years now. Ever since I had Bill Rapier on as a dev group guy, and this is his company, Amtac. It's called the Northman. It's the best like self-defense carry knife I've ever come across. As you
Fantastic.
Can see, the size is kind of just right.
Yep.
It's got a little bit of soft material on the back if you're going inside the waist. It also has a fire starter flint right here, which is pretty handy.
Interesting.
But the biggest thing is it's just that, like I said, it's kind of the perfect size.
Yep.
A little bit of serration if you need to cut rope or whatever, but super sharp.
Decent handle.
Yeah, it's just that perfect kind of go-to knife.
Yeah, you have to link me with his site or something. I'd love to check it out.
Yeah, Bill Rapier, Amtac, and what's cool, so he gifted me this when he came on the show, and they're serialized, which I think is kind of neat, and the serial number on it is 556, which I thought was pretty appropriate given.
Love it.
Given the background with using M4s and 556 ammo. But what does your morning routine look like? What time do you get up, and what's the first 3 hours?
I would say I'm an early riser, although a lot of my friends are a lot earlier than I am. I'm a 5:30 guy. I enjoy the quiet in the morning, and it takes me a while to kind of get going. So I allow myself a little quiet time. Then I will get some workout in. That's the best time for me to do it. If I wait to the end of the day, I have better energy at 5, 6 o'clock in the evening to work out, but I just never get to it. So there's always have other things that come up. So I always make sure that I get that in early. Yeah. And then at that point, depending on what the goals of the week are, I'll either practice or write. So I still enjoy writing. That's something I picked up, along the way. So that's when I'll spend a little bit of time there, depending on how much time I have. So of course we're running a business as well. So I try to get some of that creative stuff out of the way before I start actually working.
Yeah. Do you eat in the morning?
Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. Sometimes the workouts I do just ruin my appetite.
Yeah. What are you doing workout wise?
I'm doing, cardio wise. I'm still trying to run. I've got 2 brand new knees, but I like doing sprints as opposed to long distance runs. And I do a little, boxing workouts, that type of stuff where I'm just working on form and, staying in the mirror, doing a little shadow boxing and stuff. Otherwise I'm doing, compound lifts, Olympic lifts, and, anytime I have a leg day, I'm usually not hungry when I get done. Even if it's not as intense as it used to be. My brother and I used to work out stupidly, honestly, at 30 or whatever it was, and trying to see if we could put on 30 pounds of muscle. I was just being idiots. So now I just, now I replace all the joints that I destroyed back then.
Yeah, that's brutal. My dad had both of his knees replaced, and man, it seemed like it was pretty rough.
It was a rough experience, but it's like a life changer. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't get up from a dinner table. I just felt like, man, I can't protect my wife. I'm going to have to tell her, hey, distracted
grab the
dude.
Shotgun, Martha.
Distracted dude, I'm going to like chew on his ankles because I can't stand up. And it's ridiculous.
That's brutal. Where are you originally from?
I was born in Detroit.
Really?
It's right after they burned the city down, so my parents were looking for a place to move. But I moved every 2 years until I hit high school, which was super traumatic for me, although for a lot of people it would lend itself to be lots of life experience, which it of course was. But I was an anxious, introverted kid, and so I don't remember Detroit. We lived in Kansas City, Detroit, Jersey, Florida, Austin, Houston.
What were your parents doing that required you guys to move so down?
I've got a fickle dad and a fickle grandfather who was my grandfather was a traveling salesman back in the day.
Of all kinds of shit, or?
All kinds of stuff, just what he did. He was just good at that, and would pick up gigs and go travel to do stuff, and apparently move the family around. And my dad was a magazine publisher, and I don't know if your listeners remember what those were, but back in the day, that's that was a big deal. And he got so good. He was one of the original Texas Monthly founder guys. When Levy was still working out of his garage and everything. He's got memories of that. We were in Austin during that time, which is a cool time. There's another reason to go back to 70s. I'd like to check that out.
Yeah.
But he just got good at it and started being the fixer. He'd come in and fix magazines that were kind of needing some kind of uptick in publishing and their subscriptions and stuff. But he was, I say fickle, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way because I feel like I'm the same way. But he would just get in and conquer something and then feel like he would want to just move on and do something else, like, 1,200 miles away. And so back then, when you move and you're a fifth grader, you're like, bye, best friend, I'll never talk to you again.
Right.
I mean, there's no internet, there's no cell phones, your phone calls they're expensive, and you just say bye and that's it. So it was kind of traumatic for me. But again, I knew he was just doing what he needed to do.
Yeah, I can imagine, man. I had the exact opposite experience. Like I was in the same bedroom my entire childhood. Basically,
I would have loved that.
Same
though.
House.
We could have probably traded. You would have gotten more out of the places.
I wouldn't trade. I mean, to me, it was great. Good experience growing up in Iowa, and nothing I would change about it really.
Is that what part of that inspired you to go into the military?
Who's interviewing who here? No,
I'm sorry. Am I allowed to ask questions? Sorry,
I'm busting your balls. That's the cop in you, right?
Yeah.
Well, so it was a combination of two things. One, both my grandfathers were in World War II. Mom's dad was in the Navy, in the Med, on a minesweeper. My dad's dad was in the Army on the European front. And so I was abnormally enthusiastic with or for specifically World War II history growing up, much more than I think most kids would be.
Amazing.
And I was just always really fascinated by it, and it inspired me to want to serve. And then my dad was a wrestler growing up, and his body was kind of beat up from it. Like I said, he had his knees replaced. And so he was doing a lot of pool swimming rehab at the time when we were kids. And so he would take us all to the Y, and he would swim, and so would we. And They put all four of us kids in competitive swimming really early, and so I grew up swimming competitively pretty seriously my entire childhood, and I think that was probably the biggest. Those two things, so the SEAL teams kind of made sense.
Perfect combination.
Yeah. So, did you have siblings?
Yes, I have two sisters and a brother, and I'm the oldest, and that's one of the more disappointing parts of my life is that. What an asshole I was to my siblings.
That's kind of how it's supposed to work.
Well, maybe I see so many that I had an opportunity to mentor them, or we could have been a clan that did more. I mean, we still played together and stuff but it was I just feel like I was pushing them too hard in the wrong direction. We all get along great now, but I still have to apologize about every year or two.
Yeah. I guess I say that's how it's supposed to be, but I've got 2 older brothers and a younger sister, and they were phenomenal growing up. All of them were. I mean, we got along great and never really fought. And yeah, I mean, we still get along.
See, so you're the guy I envy. Like I said, I don't know where it came from, because I'm not a bully but man, I guess, kids will test boundaries, and if the boundaries allowed to be kind of pushed down the road, then that's just kind of how it goes. I don't know.
Resource guarding growing up with your siblings.
Yeah, or maybe we're just all sensitive.
Yeah.
I took advantage of that.
Yeah. I don't know. Did you play sports growing up?
I did. I was I wasn't permitted to ride motorcycles or play football.
So you did both.
So I did not. Actually, it was an absolute no. Growing up, my mother was an ICU nurse, and so that's what she saw. So, as much as I would beg, I was like, hey, just a dirt bike, just want a little YZ80 something or other. Didn't happen. So basketball was my thing. And growing up, I thought I was going to be 6'4". I mean, my feet are big enough for me to be 6'4", 6'5". They grew in 8th grade, and then the rest of me didn't. So, I'm tall enough to play ball, but I'm not tall enough to play like at a collegiate level or anything. And I played that, until even several years ago. I played pickup games and really enjoy doing that. It's competitive, but my body can't take that kind of pounding anymore. And I did rec leagues and stuff like that, because back in the day, kids wouldn't know about this today either. They show up in their pajamas to school or shorts or whatever. We couldn't wear shorts. We couldn't, all these restrictions. And hair below your collar was a no-no for anybody wanting to play sports. And so I was pulled aside by several of the high school coaches when we'd be in PE, and they'd say, Broadwater, when are you going to cut your hair? We need you on the team.
Yeah.
And me being a dumbass, I'm supposed to be a rock star, reminding them, this is, you can't have short hair and be on the stage, Yeah. And we'd go play pickup ball for them trying to court me to cut my hair and join the basketball team. I just kept playing rec ball. Yeah. But, I felt like I was decent at it, but,
Yeah.
Did you know that studies show that 80% of resolutions fail by February? You can beat the odds with Lumen and improve your wellness. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that helps measure your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it'll tell you if it sees if you're burning fat or carbs, and gives you tailored guidance to help improve your nutrition, workout, sleep, and even stress management. All you have to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and the Lumen can tell you what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. Then Lumen gives you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on your measurements. You can also breathe into it before and after workouts and meals, so Lumen can tell you exactly what's going on with your body in real time, and Lumen will give you tips to keep you on top of your wellness game. Lumen was kind enough to send me a device to try out, and I got to tell you, to be able to have that integrated and customized plan on the fly throughout the day is a game changer. Having that type of control and knowing exactly what foods do what to your body is such a huge advantage when it comes to trying to work out, to recover, to be able to perform at your optimal level, and the technology behind it is truly remarkable. I can't thank them enough for sending me a device to try out and really be able to maximize the benefits of what I eat and what it does. Your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body burns and turns the food into fuel that keeps you going. Because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, optimal metabolic wellness translates to a bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, better sleep, etc. Lumen gives you recommendations to help improve your metabolic wellness. It can also track your cycle as well as the onset of menopause, and adjust your recommendations to keep your metabolism in good shape through hormonal shifts, so you can keep up with your energy and stave off cravings for you ladies out there. Take the next step to helping improve your health. Go to lumen.me/mic drop to get 20% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/mic drop for 20% off your purchase. Thank you to Lumen for sponsoring this episode. These statements and products have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease or condition.
As you guys know, sleep is one of the most important aspects of good health. And, I train really hard, whether it's jujitsu, weightlifting, etc. Also work hard, own several different businesses, the Warrior Dog Foundation, etc. I have found over the years that getting good sleep is more and more difficult. For me, it's predominantly waking up multiple times through the night, not being able to stay in deep sleep, until the kind folks at Beam sent me their powder, which enabled me to be able to sleep through the night, get much more deep, restful sleep. And I'm super appreciative of them for both working with us here on the show and sending me such a great product that has been able to revolutionize my ability to recover, get better sleep, and be more productive during the day. That's why I'm so excited to talk about Beam's Dream Powder, a science-backed nighttime blend for sleep that's actually clinically shown to improve sleep and have you waking up refreshed. Everything changed when I found Dream. It's clinically shown to help improve sleep, and let me tell you, it absolutely works. I finally started sleeping through the night, waking up refreshed, not groggy. With better sleep, my energy and focus has come completely back. I felt like I could actually tackle my days instead of just getting through them. Other sleep aids can cause next-day grogginess, but Dream contains a powerful, all-natural blend of reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, apigenin, and melatonin to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. Now, as I look ahead to 2025, I'm determined to keep this momentum going. Dream is a part of my nightly routine, and it's made all of the difference in the world. If you're like me and have struggled with sleep in the past year, there is no better way to start 2025 than with consistent, restful nights. Dream will help you feel your best every single day. The ultimate sleep refresh for the new year is to try Beam's best-selling Dream Powder and get up to 40% off with a limited time when you go to shopbeam.com/micdrop, all caps, all one word, and use the code micdrop at checkout. That's shopbeam, BEAM.com/micdrop, and use the code micdrop for up to 40% off. Did you know that high blood pressure is one of the highest risk factors for mortality? In fact, 1 in 2 adults have high blood pressure. That is a 50-50 chance that you're a walking time bomb. However, you, not Big Pharma, can help take control of your blood pressure before it's too late. With 120 Life. 120 Life is a blend of great tasting superfruit juices that can actually help lower your blood pressure. 120 Life is formulated with ingredients that have been shown to naturally help control high blood pressure and are endorsed by thousands of health professionals. You can try it yourself risk-free with their 2-week trial pack. Just go to 120life.com and use the code DROP, all caps, all one word, DROP, to save 15% and receive free shipping. They are so sure that 120 Life can noticeably lower your blood pressure in 2 weeks that they'll give you your money back if you're not satisfied. 120 Life offers a risk-free trial with a full refund if you don't see lower numbers in 2 weeks. There's nothing to lose except your high blood pressure numbers. 120 Life is trusted by healthcare professionals with hundreds of doctors recommending it to help manage blood pressure naturally. It's not just for high blood pressure. It's also helpful for those managing diabetes. 120 Life provides visible, measurable changes in blood pressure, and you can use a simple monitor at home to track your progress. Thousands have benefited from 120 Life. It's a choice you can trust for your health. So you have nothing to lose but those high blood pressure numbers. Go to 120life.com. That's 120life.com. And remember to use the code DROP, D-R-O-P, to save 15%. This is serious. It's your life you're talking about. 120 Life can help. These statements have not been approved by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. So at what point during your childhood and kind of into the adolescent phase did law enforcement or that route kind of enter in? Because at first you did the musician thing, correct?
Yeah. I was actually one of the few people making a living at music for a long time because, I discovered that in 4th grade and just had no plan B. It was, I had plenty of people come from positions of a lot of success telling me, man, you need to have a second plan. Maybe you take a business class in college or something. And I just overloaded a bunch of music classes and said, this is all or nothing type thing, which nothing wrong with that necessarily. But when it came time to, I go through college for music and then was touring quite a bit and then had a son and started changing my perspective a little bit about being gone on the road. And I did have several music students, and back in the day, they used to have things called music stores, and we taught lessons in them and all kinds of stuff, So that was a way that I made a living. But once I got to the point where I was really trying to figure out if this was going to be something I really wanted to pursue, because, of course, it was small town touring. I mean, we're in an 87 Suburban with a trailer and, sharing a bed in a Holiday Inn. It's not like I was, in a bus and flying all over the world, but we were touring, and it just wasn't, there's a lot of camaraderie, but there was a lot of, kissing ass to these cokehead club owners and, all these regional tours. That just seemed like it wasn't as fun as I thought it was going to be. And I loved the music part, and I started considering what I was going to do, if I had my son. And then actually I brought my brother to go interview a bass player one time at a club and talked to this cat. And on our way out, apparently we brushed by a couple of frat guys too heavily through a doorway or something, apparently. And those two guys turned into 10, and they surrounded my brother and I at my car. We managed to escape and get into the car, and they proceeded to kick all the doors in and smash all the glass except for the windshield, which the last jackass thought he was Superman. Well, we're trying to get out of there, and he stands in front of us and hollering. So I broke my own windshield with his knees, and then it was one of those things that felt like this is like the nail in the coffin. Like this, I need to find something else to do, and it was a frustrating time because I'd never thought of anything else, but it was also a brilliant time because I hadn't thought of anything else. It literally was anything in the world was open to me. And had a couple of cops that used to come follow one of my bands I played in, and I used to carry a few of them to their car after I loaded my equipment. But they were great guys, and they talked me into doing it. I kept thinking, through my music days, I was playing in multicultural bands and stuff. I was the 15-year-old kid, driving to the Third Ward in Houston, supposed to be all dangerous and everything else, and I was the only white kid playing in any of these, suburban clubs. But these were my music friends. They were all 30-some-year-old guys, and they took care of me, and we just did music together. I didn't even know it was in a dangerous place. So I felt like between that and going to a school of music and arts and just being around, kids doing dope all the time, I was never into that. But I was always around it, and I didn't, I was the guy that was the chameleon. I had jock friends, and I had friends that went to the smoking section at lunch, Yeah. So ultimately, they talked me into doing it. And at that moment, I thought, man, kicking indoors and working undercover would be something that I really felt confident that I could do, just because I felt like I had some real relationships in different cultures. I felt like I could kind of be the chameleon. I'm mild-mannered and otherwise had zero business being a cop. Yeah. After, I had to cut 8 inches of hair off even to go get my license done. I was like, told them I lost my license even though I hadn't, because I was about to go give them my ID and show them where I'd come from. Yeah. So that's kind of, honestly, that's where it was. It was just somebody bringing up the idea and me thinking, yeah, that sounds kind of cool. And I'm sure, when you learn more about what you can do in the military and stuff too, you get these grandiose ideas. You were actually able to accomplish something more remarkable than 99.9% of the people can do. But that's part of it is I thought I had all these grandiose ideas about, well, maybe, can you skip doing the patrol car stuff and just, go kick in doors and like get SWAT certified and all this stuff, like an idiot kid. But if it's really something that turns into something you're super passionate about, and that's when, to your point, that's when I really started diving into books on, how that works and stuff, and trying to get myself transferred to neighborhoods that were higher crime areas so that I got experience and understood, the culture and the types of people that I'd be dealing with and all that kind of stuff. So that's really what enticed me.
How old were you when you went in?
27.
Oh, wow. So probably one of the older cadets in the academy?
Yeah, not the oldest. I think the cutoff back then was around 35. They won't take you after that. But And we had some other cats that were great mentors in the class that had come from other departments back then. One of my good friends was 7 years Dallas PD and just wanted to be closer to home, so he came over to Fort Worth PD, and they made him go through the entire academy and everything. So, but it was great having a friend, to be able to bounce ideas and understand how it really goes.
Oh, I imagine. So that first couple of years in, you had to do patrol, I imagine?
Yeah.
Well, how was that?
And, I was the long-haired kid that was constantly harassed by the police. So, I was going to be damned if that's the way I behaved. So that was really kind of my main thing. I learned to appreciate that the way policing was at that time. It was, you do investigative stops. If you profile somebody, it's in a weird time of night and a weird type of whatever, then you have a legitimate traffic stop, then you make one, and then, it leads to other things. And what I learned in short order is, rapists and robbers and murderers all drive places. So if you're discerning in the way that you do your police work and you're doing investigatory stops and you're not just hammering people with a bunch of tickets just to pad stats or something, then, you really get to know a lot of people. And, I found myself, answering calls at a grocery store for somebody that just, stole $20 worth of stuff. And 8 hours later, I'm finally getting them into a rehab. Instead of just hauling them to jail, I, try to pull some strings and figure out other ways that we can be creative about doing the job that we're there to do. But you're taught a very definitive way to go about things. And in this day and age, especially, I think they need a lot more compassionate people, but not lazy people.
Right.
I mean, I had tons of lazy cops back in my day as well. So I'm not saying the new generation is lazy, but my experience lately has been, I've really struggled to hold the same level of appreciation for most police officers. And patrols where you learn that. You go out, and if you're not on a call, then you need to be initiating work and, being proactive and finding productive things to do. It doesn't necessarily mean you're putting people in jail. You're just looking for things to do to be productive and protective and learn your community, meet people, just stop off and chat with the cats on the corner. That's how you gather intel, et cetera,
Yeah, I mean, to me, the discretion piece of policing is where you're going to gain community support or lose it, and I know that that's always going to be a gray area.
Yep.
And I can imagine it's tricky. Cops are humans the same way the rest of us are. They have good days and bad days. They have fights with their spouses. They have, financial frustrations that, may put them in a certain mentality or mood that's maybe a little prohibitive to being a discretionary cop when it would make sense to be. But
no question.
I think especially nowadays with the microscope that's on police and the lack of support or the amount of support that has dwindled over the last, say, decade. Mm-hmm. For me, I mean, I'm not a cop, and while I've spent some time as a reserve officer in a small department and have done some calls and stuff, so I do have some understanding, but I don't pretend to be, some multi-year veteran of a police force. But being in the military overseas in combat operations, there's a lot of similar type of scenarios you find yourself in. And I just, to me, it tends to baffle me a little bit that that's not kind of a priority. And I guess I'm curious. I know it's been a while since you've been in the academy, but I would hope that that's an emphasis that's put on in the academy that says, hey, discretion is there for a reason, and let's look at the 30,000 foot view, because it seems like a lot of cops get kind of blinders on, and they're focused on it was 6 miles an hour over, so I'm gonna have to write, and it's just like some fucking soccer mom running late, and her kid's snot-nosed kid in the back's throwing shit at her, and and it's
somebody going 10 over on the way to the airport. You're like, dude, you're already stopping them. They're already in a hurry. And I think it's a discipline, and I also think it's a personality type. And the problem you run into, and you probably have seen it in the military too, when we're hiring people, it's like, hey, so-and-so's an 8-year Marine, and it's going to be great. I was like, well, an 8-year Marine doesn't mean it's going to be great. It could be absolutely great, but it also
could be a train wreck.
Yes, because you have numbers of people. It's a percentage of people that are A players in each. But you're selecting type A's essentially to go be cops. That's just the personality type you're pulling out of. And so I do think there's a lot more. There was not a whole lot of that when I went through, I can tell you that, which is why, again, I learned how to police and learned, what the tactics were and, this is what proactivity looks like. There's a whole lot of stuff, which seems ironic now, a whole lot of stuff about, we're going to watch this and figure out what this person did wrong before they got shot in the face, and this is what happened when, this traffic stop and they had no idea, they couldn't see in. And so they're overreacting. And so you try to learn a lot from that. But when you're starting as a rookie with no experience other than be careful, it's good, he's going to shoot you in the throat, and he could do it pretty easily. You're starting from behind the 8-ball in a day and age like this. Yeah. And a lot of stuff that they try to teach now, I've even seen some demonstrations in some of the academies where I shake my head, because like any trend, I think people will take a lesson and then they go so far the other direction that it's unreasonable before it kind of bounces back into reasonableness. There is a lot of room for improvement, but some of the things that are being taught now almost breeds complacency, because why would you do anything? You're going to lose everything if you make the wrong decision. And they had a dude that was in the academy class, a guest speaker, I guess, from one of the communities, a big old black guy, 6'6", whatever, just giant dude, and he was using examples on the, explaining to these kids in the academy that, there are certain things that people do in a culture that you need to understand is kind of our cultural way that things happen. And some of that I totally get. It's kind of cheesy in some ways. You learn about, hey, don't look these types of people in the eye, don't blah, 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 if they're not doing this. You learn some generic stuff. But this guy was saying, man, if somebody kind of steps up on you and he demonstrates it, having, the cop, the recruit, kind of stand up in the middle of the room, and they're having some kind of banter back and forth, and sir, I need you to, come over here and comply. He's like, I don't want to. And I come step up on you. I'm just a loud person, but I don't mean anything aggressive, but I'm standing up on you. And he stands up on this kid and he's trying to convince the kid that that's okay. I'm like, that's where it's not okay. You don't put yourself in the most disadvantageous position ever out of a respect for someone's culture that could be just acting in a way that is normal, and just bank that you're going to know that guy that well. So I think there are some things that they're making a fervent effort to move forward, but to some degree also it's just scaring people into complacency, which is what I see a lot of now.
Yeah. And I guess to be fair, also, there's so many interactions that are super negative, that are super dangerous, that, I can certainly understand, again, having been in situations overseas where, you're kind of assuming the worst, because, if you experience the worst 370 times in a row, it's like the 371st time you're just going to expect that this guy's trying to kill you, or whatever, and that's a tough mentality to be in. I do think kind of taking the approach that you would take with young kids in terms of staying calm. It's like I think one of my favorite, I don't know if you'd call it an adage or whatever, but is be the thermostat, not the thermometer. Whether it's with young kids or I think, cops approaching a window at a traffic stop or a domestic call or what have you, is that, if you're not yelling and swearing and, being, confrontational to start with.
Yep.
Even if somebody's confrontational with you, like by staying calm, the chances of them coming down a notch is much higher than if you ramp it up,
Absolutely. And that's why I say a lot of it's personality type. Yeah. And that's why I think I had such success, because, I was a hippie musician coming in and then all of a sudden gearing up. And so that was kind of my manner anyway.
Do they talk about that much in the academy? Like, hey, how you conduct yourself makes a big difference?
I don't want to say no, because it has been a long time since I went through the academy, but I really don't remember being taught anything that was personality specific. It was a lot of professionalism and stuff like that, obviously, and they don't want you amped up. But I would have loved to have seen more examples of people getting amped up in order to, de-escalation in general. They do a little verbal judo stuff that was just coming into a popularity at the time. So they, there's a lot of things that you can do now that I think they could teach better. And because even if you're being conversational, you're being inclusive in the way your verbiage is, or you're mirroring and, spitting back some of the things that people say that you're acknowledging and essentially in a subconscious way that you're listening to them and things like that. That's great, but that should be somewhat natural, because I saw people all through my career that would, come into a call that we had perfectly under control and just amp everybody up. And I'm like, man, but there's no consequence for that.
Yeah. Well, I think there is. I don't think it's maybe necessarily interdepartmental. I think the consequence is community support.
Right, it was where we are. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I didn't mean that.
So, I have a ton of cop friends and have worked with, at this point, probably thousands of them, across the country, over the last 20 years being in canine industry. And, I have no doubt that there's probably some listening right now that are like, well, you don't fucking see what we deal with. And it's like, hey, I'm not saying that it's easy. I get it. I just look at it as that, the community is going to be a reflection of what they think based on the collective average of the interactions, and so it's unfortunately, and I use that word with emphasis, unfortunately, I think it's up to police to, focus on how they engage with people. I mean, to me, something as simple as, let's say somebody's speeding, he's pissed and doesn't pull over right away, whatever, he seems angry and agitated. Like, to me, coming up and being like, hey man, what's up? Like, you doing all right? Mm-hmm. Like, is everything okay? Like, just asking like, hey, what's going on, man? Like, not, why the fuck were you,
lecture him about going 102 when he already knows he's going 102. He's a grown man, right?
Yeah. So it's like, hey, is everything, like, to me, trying to boil somebody down, like, that would be my first priority, and again, I haven't done a ton of it, but I've done it before. I've been, again, with a police department arresting guys, and one in particular was on drugs, and, obviously when they're in an altered chemical state of mind, it can be different, but I don't know, I'm not trying to armchair quarterback or whatever. I just look at it as, again, if you take kind of the 30,000 foot view approach, like, if you're seeing a national shift towards, losing support for police, which I don't want to see. Right. It's like, okay, well, how do you fix that? I don't think being a bigger dick, and slapping your dick on the, on the windowsill of a car by saying, I'm going to fucking tell you how the cow eats the cabbage. Like, I don't think that's going to be the way to solve it. Right. You can disagree with me and say, I don't know what I'm talking about. And I would say you're right, but that's just what I think, Yeah,
like I absolutely think you have authority to speak on that anyway, because it's really about how you perform under exigent circumstances. Yeah. The thing about cops too, it's like the pastors who breach trust of the congregation. Yeah. You are taking on a higher level of responsibility, and therefore now you take on an additional degree of accountability. So you're in a disposition where you got to play by the rules and they don't. But that's the way it is. You signed up for this. So yes, it's not fair. And yes, you get to see a lot of stuff. And some people just, by the way, use that as a giant ass excuse, because it's not like every day you're getting shot at either. So, and depending on what city and what district and all that kind of stuff, you can get lots of action. But I think a lot of people, lean on that a little too much too, and then allow themselves to misbehave and then, blame the job.
Yeah. Because it's like if that's too much for you to, be able to control yourself, then maybe that shouldn't be your line of work. You know, absolutely. And again, like, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying that cops don't have a tough job. They do. I my hat's off to them. It really is. But I just, like, I know. I've been pulled over before, as have most people, or pretty much everybody, and I know how I like being talked to, and I know that. If somebody treats me like an adult, even if I was doing something fucking stupid, that's going to, A, give me way more respect for that guy, B, way more compliant, not that I'm non-compliant, but it just seems like such a smarter way to go about it, and I think ego is probably the hardest thing. I know it is. There's certainly times where I get wrapped up in ego challenges, and it can get the best of me, but I try to be cognizant of it all the time. But All right, so you did patrol for a few years, and then you what was the transition into the non kind of routine patrol?
Yeah, so they used to have a program. So once I got purposefully transferred, like I said, to the highest crime area in the cities, it was in Fort Worth, Texas. So talking about just short of 1 million people, a couple thousand cops or whatever in terms of size. My whole goal was to get some experience working undercover so that I could actually, be accepted in the narcotics unit and really kind of birth it from there. So they had a weed and seed program that had been defunct for some time.
Ironic.
Huh?
Kind of ironic. The narcotics programs called
Yes,
weed and seed.
Weed and seed. Yes. So it was essentially something where the feds would have a budget that they would send to a department where they could make small time buys or informant buys and then hit these low level drug houses that narcotics didn't have the staff or time to hit. You want to hit somebody that's got, 10 grams of crack. Well, they have bigger fish to fry, but if it's in your district and you have informants that you can work, and they had that set up. It was kind of a haphazard operation for many years. And I managed to petition to some of the lieutenants and sergeants for me to get not only SWAT and entry trained, but also to go with someone else and learn how to write search warrants, how to gather evidence properly, and do all those things, so that from a patrol position, I was able to actually, after we got permission to do it, SWAT handed down all their out-of-date vests. So we had vests and helmets that were, now retired except for us. We had some old beat-up van that sometimes started, sometimes didn't. But me on patrol, I was the primary guy. So during my patrol shift, between 2 and 10 or whatever it was at the time, I would go out and make cases and find dope houses. And then when we got done with our shift, I would go, put the house up. I would go get the warrant and put the house up on the board, design it out. Everybody was certified to go in, and we just, without great equipment and in a fairly crude manner, would go hit all these houses. And so it was a fantastic experience for me. By the time I made narcotics, I had 500 dynamic search warrants that I'd not only run, but I had planned. And so, and with nobody being shot, which is key too, because I think when they did it the first time, there were quite a few shootings, including ADs that were happening, which can happen when it's just kind of a less of an organized unit. But the thing that I thought was greatest about it was that you had to leverage creativity when you had the minimal amount of equipment. You'd go in some of these places were like steel doors and steel door frames in the public housing places. I'm like, ain't no battering ram going to get through a steel door with a steel frame. And
not with that attitude.
And you only find out after the 10th time, and you're thinking, man, these folks are just crossing their legs inside and turning the TV down and arming themselves while we're outside screaming. Yeah. And so we had procured a bowling ball, and so part of it was, we'd radio to the guy in the back who would throw a bowling ball through a bathroom window, which is where they would dump the evidence as well, and make it sound like we're coming through the windows, even though we weren't. But it was not only a distraction, but it'd make them feel like, well, I can't go dispose of this stuff, and buy us a little bit of time, little creative ways to do entries that were quite atypical.
It's like the caveman flash crash. That's a pretty ingenious tactic, I think.
Well, we had one that we got in. I remember too that my brother's a fire chief, and he at the time was working in a district nearby. So I procured some fire jackets from him, and that was the other. We'd break and rake windows and then throw the fire jacket over the sill. We'd dive in and roll. It was still faster than the front door sometimes, right. And it wasn't the wisest way to do it. And again, we had no incidents, thank goodness. So, even though we weren't acrobats, we felt like, going in like Batman or whatever.
Yeah.
But it, like I said, made you be creative, because the more expeditiously you can get in and clear those rooms, as you would know better than I, the safer it's going to be, really. So if you have to think of something creative that involves a little bit more acrobatics to get in, that exigency is not part of a bad equation.
Yeah. And so in the years that you did that, you guys were shots fired where you guys were taking rounds, or?
Nope.
Really?
Not one time. 500 warrants. Never.
And you guys never shot anybody?
Mm-mm.
Wow. Was there a particular drug that was the most prominent in that time period and in that location?
Yeah, in that particular time, it was still crack, and it's kind of where I learned exactly who was who doing those things.
What do you mean by that?
I would, by going in, you're in creating cases and finding new places to hit. You're gleaning information from people you either interview or you find out, this chick's in 3 of these different houses that we've hit over the last couple of weeks, and there's some kind of tie, and you're investigating that lineage and figuring out different things. So, and by the time I got into narcotics, I literally had a hit list of people that were connected, in some way. So it was just something that, in order to get the next warrant going, you're constantly looking for the next lead, the next problem area. You hear stuff from, patrolmen who are obviously like, hey man, I think this is a dope house, or I just, came across this. But if you're creating your own leads, that's how you do it. You're just going out and snooping and talking to people, anonymously at that time.
Were most of the, I guess, interactions that you had in terms of the crack dealers and, I guess that entire network, was most of the stuff made here, or was it being brought in from Mexico? Or
it was made here in terms of the crack being made here.
Forgive my ignorance. How is that? What is that?
Yeah, so they'll take a kilo, which did then and still does come through Mexico. Even when it was coming through Colombia, it still stopped through Mexico in a lot of cases, not in every case, but depending on what routes you're talking about. And they would just take that and cut it and cook it down to a more pure form.
This is cocaine you're talking about?
Yeah, cocaine to a purer form, and then it would come out as crack, which is a more intense high, a lot more addictive. And then of course you went through the whole '80s thing about all the false the misnomers about it, and it just happened to be something that hit a lot of those poor neighborhoods. And at the time that I was working, they still had a lot of really skewed laws that came through the '80s, where they made it, if you got caught with cocaine, then you'd get this 10-year sentence. But if you're caught with crack cocaine, it's 25-year sentence.
These are mandatory minimums.
Yeah. Federal guidelines were really, really tough on folks during those times. And you can only to a very small extent understand how that would work, because again, it takes cocaine to make the other, and the other is done in a pan on the stove. It's not like some kind of dangerously sophisticated thing that they do. And it was cheaper to buy crack because you're breaking down that key into these little quantities, and people are getting addicted. And so it was something that hit all of the poorer communities. And so a lot of the poorer communities were minority communities. And so before you know it, you got these laws that are cornering, they're jailing minorities based on quantities that should be equal in the eyes of the law in order to eradicate that crack problem.
Do you know ballpark, like what 1 kilo of cocaine would produce crack-wise? Volume, like how?
Yeah, so there's different ways to make crack, and the guys that I was working around could do anywhere from a third more in a kilo to doubling it, depending on if it was crap or not. Because so they've, just like anything, you got good quality and bad quality guys, and the dudes that I was working around were pretty much known. You could get it on the cheap from this dude, but the high is just okay because he just blows it up with a bunch of cut.
What are they cutting it with usually? Do you know?
Baking powder and stuff like that. It wasn't like that, rat poison type heroin cuts or fentanyl or anything like that back then. So cocaine is, pretty basically, it comes out looking like a little bar of soap. So it's like anything else. It's like making bread, and you put all this stuff in it to fill it out, and that's what happens in the cut.
But, so I mean, if you cut, let's say, well, just for easy math, you half it, so you double the amount. And now, if you're cooking it down, doesn't that kind of defeat the purpose of cutting it, or it just makes the concentration less at the same level?
Well, the cooking process makes it intense still because you're smoking it instead of snorting it. However that works, and I haven't experienced that, so I can't speak to it. If you're actually doubling it, you're just doubling the quantity that you can sell, but you're not actually doing it in a way that's as pure.
Right.
They used to have something they called straight drop, which is when they would just do no cut and they would just cook it down, and it would be super pure, and it would be more expensive to buy. But when you're in a poor community that's like a luxury.
Yeah.
You know, if you're a prostitute trying to get high and you only have so much money, then you try to get more of it, even if the high's not quite there. You know what I mean?
Right. It reminds me of terrorists overseas cooking down fertilizer. Like they'll take, you know, a 37% ammonium nitrate, you know, which is high for world standards, and then cook it down to where now it's considerably higher than that in a percentage. So the same volume does way more damage.
Yeah, all the impurities are essentially cooked away in that process.
Yeah.
And then they just put back the filler, you know, with a cut in order to make it whatever the quantity is. And since it's not regulated, then you still have these people that can make it however they want. And it's the people that get high that can make the judgment.
Right. Are you, so when you're doing these 500 raids, I mean, I can only imagine you're running into living situations at times, or maybe even most times, that are just horrible to come into. I imagine kids and like just, I mean, what are some examples of?
Yeah, almost all of them were bad. And typical dope houses, these guys would, the kingpins, so to say, that I would only later be able to deal with, because again, I'm at this point, first stage, I'm hitting the low level houses. Yeah. But these are typically run by dudes who have the weight, who give it to somebody who cooks it, who gives it to people to deliver it, and then they're getting, you know, a quarter kilo of something that they keep under the hood of a car, and you know, a quarter ounce at a time. They're taking it from there and walking into the house so that you can make the buys. So a lot of the houses were not necessarily houses that people lived in full time, or they were houses that were procured by the dealers while people lived in there. So you have people that are on welfare in there with 4 kids in there, and a lady who lets, you know, some dude come in there and share some of the cut of profits, you know, for them, which is ruining the welfare system too, by the way. But it's the kids are the most disgraceful thing. I mean, the kids were in the middle of all of it. They know exactly what's going on. They're not ignorant to it. You know, they're growing up in a hard environment. So it's not like, you know, me when I was 6 years old, I wouldn't have known one thing or the other. You'd flash dope in front of me, I would have had no clue. I'd had no clue about suicide as a solution either. But these days, 10-year-olds are thinking about it. I mean, there's just it's a different thing. Kids are a lot smarter than we give them credit oftentimes. And if you just put them in that environment, they're not dumb. And unfortunately, some of those parents are so ignorant that they're the ones actually teaching the lessons. So that kids often, you grow up and you know, some people, you try to find out what's the key that made this person be like their parents and this person never be like their parents. But when the parent is actually coaching them how to be a criminal or justifying criminal activity by being in there for money, then you're just giving this kid no freaking chance. Yeah. So I saw a lot of that.
That's tragic. I mean, I do think it begs the question, though, you know, in those environments where things are so dire to begin with, I mean, to me, that enhances how tough it would be to go in there and do that to a certain extent. Is that, you know, if people are in, you know, really rough areas where, you know, they have no skills, you know, their parents did the same shit, you know, and now they're just kind of doing all they know and all they can do. Yeah. Like, man, it's just, that's a tough spot to be in.
Yeah, it was. It was something that I learned pretty early on, is that if you work really hard at trying to eradicate the narcotics problem, then things will not change, because it's a giant wheel spin. Yeah. But if you stop trying, it can absolutely get worse. But that's why the dope stuff was so frustrating, and which is why, to me, I started really trying to focus on, goes hand in hand with violent crime. And so how can we focus more on getting the violent criminals out of there, instead of just saying, hey, you know, cocaine's more expensive to get now because we're hitting these people or whatever. Yeah. Which at that point, again, hitting small time is just hitting small time. But that's the part of the problem with the police solution, that I would only later figure out other ways to circumvent that whole part of the process. It's only a little piece of a solution. The arrest is like one little piece. It's not a solution, but you also don't want to just leave it there. I mean, because this is being controlled by people who have more money but are still gangsters, you know, putting this stuff down into their own communities. So you can't just allow it to go. But you're right, it is a conundrum, because you also feel like, you're punishing people who already are in a bad disposition, and now they're getting hammered more. Somebody's going to now lose their welfare checks because they were allowing these other people to come in, and somebody's trying to find a fast buck because they're growing up in an environment where they don't have a father figure that's there, and their junior high buddies making $1,000 a week doing easy work, and you got to take a bus to McDonald's to try to get something to to
So what
put in
is
your
the
pocket.
solution?
The solution, I think, is actually mentoring the kids. You've got to find opportunities at an earlier age to teach these kids normal societal expectations, how manners are supposed to be executed, how to interview for a job, learning the dire consequences. I think that's the main thing that a lot of kids that are fatherless, they talk about all those fatherless kids. The main thing is that they lack accountability. I think it would be the same problem. I know critics will say, well, the mothers, give all this. Well, it would be the same problem without a mother also. But the mothers, unfortunately, are the ones that always get stuck with the kid. The dad just bails. And so that's a vast majority of the people. But there's a high lack of accountability. And man, when you have a kid that grows up in an environment like that who doesn't feel like they're accountable for anything, I mean, there's your dangerous dude right there.
Yeah. I mean, I agree completely. I guess the big question and the toughest part with that is, it's like, okay, that makes sense. This is what we need to do. But, how do you actually do that? Because to me, without a father in the home, that's a 24/7 gig. Like if you're trying to do community policing or Boys and Girls Club stuff, mentorships, things of that nature, like that's such a small percentage of the interactions that a child has with adults.
Absolutely.
And so if 95% of it is negative and 5% of it is, people trying to make a difference, like it's kind of a losing battle.
Sort of, except, really creating, if you take a neighborhood of, 20 kids that are around the same age and you can get 3 or 4 of them in a program, there's programs around that particular hood in particular that mentor children of incarcerated parents, and they're mentoring the mothers also. And then you have more peers that are seeing success, and it's got to be incremental. And I know there's still people working on, prison release, and how can these guys survive? They now have choices that are 1 deep instead of 1 million deep on choices that they can make, because they're not even allowed to do half the stuff that you would normally choose from. And that's great, and it's absolutely necessary. Like I said, we just got to look at it like this is a problem where we don't need to get a SWAT team and go in and arrest human trafficking victims and then just stick them back on the street. If that's all you're doing, you're just wasting time and manpower, because that's a part of the solution that's super important. But unless you have the help that they need to provide after the fact, then they're just going to be the next one you find in a month later, right? Yeah, and it's the same with those kids. It's a matter of just taking it case by case, getting them early enough to start really teaching them how to have real confidence and to see that their ceiling isn't here. Yeah. That's why I think most of them just are looking at their peers and like, well,
this is what I have.
Yeah, and we sell dope because I'm just trying to feed my family, and you hear that all the time. But again, that's when you just don't really have a clear view of what your options are.
Yeah, that's brutal.
Yeah.
It's tragic to say the least. All right, so you did that for a few years. What was the next step?
I finally did, make it into the narc unit, and did some work there. And then that's when I had my hit list, and that's when I was trying to figure out how to conquer that hit list. My hit list was Crips, so it just happened to be where some of my beats were early on. It wasn't like I was picking on Crips. I just happened to be making a lot of those connections. And it was an organization that was causing a lot of that distribution to happen, and it was accompanied by violence. And at some point, they had a city councilman that had a major complaint from the community, and they got together with the chief, and they said, spare no expense. There's a particular neighborhood that has been just inundated with crime. It was a place where cops went in too deep because it was just a real rough and tumble part of town. It was already in a bad part of town, and it was just the worst part of the bad part of town, type of thing. And they said, we have to eradicate the crime here and spare no expense. So they had gang units and narcotics units doing jump outs and writing warrants, hitting dry holes, finding nothing, and interviewing people was for naught. So despite all these efforts, I had my most genius idea, which was, hey, I remember sitting down with an informant friend of mine. It was a South Texas guy, and we're sitting with a glass of whiskey, and I said, all right, so here's the deal. We're talking about the fishbowl, which is what cops called it the fishbowl. The bad guys called it something else, but
do you know what they call it?
It was N-Hood. It was just it was a sect of the Crip. It was a 4-tray Crip set that was N-Hood, they called it, which is, it's whatever, just make up stuff.
Yeah.
But we called it fishbowl because there was, it's a 6 square block area, one way in, one way out, lookouts on the roofs of each. Everybody's using radios. It borders a park, and there's no way to go down there and be secretive, essentially. So I just, I posed the idea. I said, man, we've been doing all this different stuff, and I know I've got experience, and this is what I want to do. I want to start going down there. I'm going to pose as like a big time dope dealer from South Texas, and I can drive you in there saying, I'm here just to help my guy build up his game. I don't play with this stuff. You guys are small time compared to what I'm used to doing, and just, play this off. And I said, I just want to work my way up the chain and blow this thing up from the inside out.
So even as a white guy, this is the plan.
Yes.
So
and this is why, this is why that story is significant, because, I don't know if you've ever had whiskey come out of your nose, but that's what happened to him as he's laughing his ass off so hard.
Good way to clear out the sinuses.
Yeah. It's like, man, I'm dead serious. I know this sounds funny, and obviously, I'm pretty white, but I'm pretty gangster. Come on, And my confidence was in just the ability to talk to people. It really was. I didn't even frame it like I'm going to get jumped in or figure out a way to do it that way. That's why I said, man, I just pose as a dealer. You're leveraging the types of people there who, what they want, but a typical cop is, trying to get in and out and make a case and make an arrest and get out. So they don't take no for an answer and whatever. And my biggest thing was, if I can take my time doing this, which I pitched to my sergeant, he also laughed. He wasn't drinking whiskey at the time either, but I convinced him to allow me to give this a shot. I said, but if you're leveraging stuff that they want and you can have a longer term operation happen, which was kind of rare, since the late 70s, you just don't do deep cover operations anymore. Everything was quick and easy. Then I tell people no all the time. It'd be the first thing I said, no. I don't need you handing me that stuff. This is all about getting my boy getting his game started, man. I'm just helping him out. So you go hand it to him, and then, they'd walk around and hand him stuff, and I'd hand him a C note from me, and he would hand it to them. And I'm pretending like there's no connection, and they're pretending like there's no connection, but I'm an undercover cop sitting there watching facilitating a deal.
Right.
So it still counts. It just, people watch movies, and so they think, and me saying no was significant because
they weren't used to that.
Yeah, you start doing the big 20 questions too, of like, I ain't seen you around here. What are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. There's people getting their asses kicked for even showing up there being white.
Well, yeah, I mean, so I guess that was kind of my train of thought is you have this idea that's in theory, and then there's the practical application of it. Yeah. So, I mean, did you almost kind of, the way a method actor would come up with a character, like did you kind of internally go over like, this is how I'm going to act, this is how I'm going to talk, this is the kind of vibe, like did you kind of rehearse that and put that together, or did you just wing it?
Yes and no. So again, this is an example of how people are trained to work narc or whatever. You go to a DPS academy class and they teach you all these different ways that you can dirty your car and fit into this and that. I just thought differently. I thought, okay, if I, Tegan, were going to actually try to do this, I had a little sociopath in me, but I was still me. How would I do it and where would I start? Well, I'd still start here. And how would I do it? I'd be me. I wouldn't try to pretend. The more you pretend, the more crap you got to remember, and that just gives you less brain power to react or respond to things that are actually, surprising you. So I really, my name was T too, so people already called me T anyway, and I didn't dirty my car. I came down there and just said, I'm a big timer, but I'm also not going to give you my life story, because if I ask you, well, do you have a license? Let me see your picture on your license. I mean, cops carry that crap around all the time. Like you're ever going to show someone your license.
Yeah.
If you're an undercover cop and you want to show some, no, really, that's my name, and I'm going to show you my license, then just go home.
Like you've already lost.
Yeah, it's already done.
Yeah.
You don't ask them that question.
Yeah.
And I would tell them just the same. But the fact that you can say no means, okay, I'm presenting myself as an opportunity. You see me helping this guy out. I've got a wad full of C notes that actually isn't a wad full of C notes, because I'm working on a police budget, which is 2 C notes on the outside and like 100 ones in the middle.
Yeah.
But you don't know that. And so they view me as an opportunity at that point. So once I kind of warmed myself up a little bit, and I was on such a limited budget that I began spending time down there, finding any excuse to be down there. So if I knew I saw a cop car that was a couple of blocks up the way, I would sometimes just roll through there and pull up to the guys on the block, which are the low-level folks. They had two houses that were the central dealing hubs. One had that straight drop I told you about, and the other was just a bunch of crap. But both were successful, and both were coordinated, and they both knew about each other. So I'd go down to one of the crews and just cruise through and say, hey, man, I'm just letting you know there's like police like right up the street. They've been sitting there for some time. I'm just letting you know I got to get out of here. And then I'd just take off, just giving them a heads up that it's a patrol car. I don't even know what they're doing, but they're not watching them. I would just give them an excuse to go down there and have some FaceTime.
So these, like, was that your very first trip in there, your interaction? Was that the plan? Was like, I'm just going to go in there and give them a heads up?
No, not the first time. That was, the first time, again, I rolled down there with a dude that did fit the profile, and I said, you're going to drive, we're going to go down, we're going to target this dude if we can find somebody that deals with him. And it was kind of a long-term vision of, this is a guy that's 4 steps above these people we're going to be buying from. And it so happened that the first time we pulled in, we saw his girlfriend's car. And so his girlfriend ends up being one of the people that came up and started giving me all the questions. I'm like, lady, you don't ask me questions, I don't ask you questions, and I'm here for him anyway. So I just kept deferring. Like, this has nothing to do with me. I'm partnered up with this cat. You guys are a bunch of pissant drug dealers. I don't even play with that. Yeah. And so I kept deferring. And what was brilliant at the time, not brilliant, but just serendipitous, is that her suspicion led her to go into the house and get him and bring him out to kind of make sure everything was still cool. Yeah. And so he comes out. I still, just gave him the, hey, what's up? But again, I'm on the passenger seat. You guys do the deal. She tried to walk that dope over to my side again. I said, nah, I don't want to touch nothing. Acting like, you know how this game goes. If this guy's buying it, you don't go try to hand stuff to me. Don't put that in my hand. This is his deal. And so I deferred it all, and it would look less like what a cop would do. Even in a successful deal, I'd be like, a cop I want the hand-to-hand, I want the this or this. But again, I'm witnessing the deal anyway. So the fact that he even stood there, it's not like he came over and introduced himself or anything, but I know who the dude was just serendipitous, because I'm like, man, I got a little FaceTime with this guy now. So you start learning the cars. We're just buying little samples. And so I would find another excuse to come down there and ask for somebody that wasn't there. And I knew they weren't there. And they said, man, no, he's not around, but what can I get you, man? It's like, no, that's cool. I don't need anything. I'm just, I'm looking for him. Tell him T-stop through, spend a little bit of time. After a few months of that and successful deals going down, then I stop in and I, beat their ass at a game of Madden while we wait for somebody to show up, and then that's more street cred than moving keys at that point, because there's a lot of smack talking in that.
Yeah. Well, so, have you seen Training Day?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, like that's what I imagine. Like when you say that, is that, you're in somebody's house, there's a bunch of dudes around. Like, were there ever any super tense moments where, were you wired? Did you have a body cam or any kind of shit like that?
Yeah. So here's the goofy part, is that obviously I was down there every single day, weekends, whatever, because I was trying to build a case, and I had such a limited budget that I was just finding excuses to be around and be present without necessarily having to force a deal. The way things went back then, this is 2005, 6, 7, 8 period of time. everything you see in the movies is exactly how it worked.
Really?
I had a sergeant the same sergeant who approved letting me do this, knew I was an ass kicker in terms of just, I was hard work. I wasn't the guy that goes do 3-hour lunches and find stuff to do that's pissant. So he trusted that I was going to go work, but I worked off the books as much or more than I worked on the clock so that I could be present. And so, yeah, there was a time where eventually I would go visit this dude, not too long after, and it was the first time I was invited to his house. And so I go to pick up an informant because we're supposed to do a kilo. And so I go to my informant's place. My informant is, of course, looked like he just rolled out of freaking bed. I'm like, come on, dude. The informant's getting on my nerves. He's great information, but it's not a disciplinarian. He's not on time. Yeah, I kind of messing around with dopers is no different than being in the music industry where everybody's on their own clock and whatever. Well, this day he comes out and he's got this other fool with him. Both of them are from South Texas, but this Hispanic guy, he'd already told me about him. His name was Carlos, and he was associate of the Los Zetas at the time, who were the big Mexican drug cartel enforcers. And he was up in the Fort Worth, Dallas area laying low because Austin was getting some heat where he had his game going on. So I already knew who this dude was. I was a little perturbed, but this was such an opportunity for me. And I was off the books. So I was like, man, this opportunities like this don't just fall in your lap. I don't cancel on this dude, and I don't call a team of 8 white dudes to park in their Suburbans around the block. And I mean, it just doesn't, it can't happen like that. So I rolled off the books to do some of the more significant deals. And that particular time was kind of a boneheaded decision. I should have insisted that dude stay back because he wasn't vetted by me. I knew who he was, and it wasn't a great answer that I knew who he was. But my informant, I knew who he was, and half the time, by this time, I'm bringing him just to watch my back while we're doing stuff, if I'm playing video games or whatever. In this particular case, I said, friggin' bring the caboose. We just got to go because this dude's waiting, and we got to get in there and get this deal done. So we get to the house. It's a typical, layout, old 40s, 50s clapboard home, with the chain link fence around the front and dogs tied to the porch, all that kind of stuff. We get up. There's always a burglar bar cage out that surrounds the front door that remains locked on most of these houses, especially the ones that you don't do deals at. This was one of the places where this cat lays his head, so this was another reason why it was opportune. This was kind of a giant gesture on his part because I'd established a lot of trust by then. And some fool opens the door that I don't recognize, and we're standing on the stoop. It's like a 3-step stoop right outside this burglar bar cage, so we're not actually accessing the actual door, but he opens the door to the house from inside the home and points a shotgun at us through the bars. And he's screaming a bunch of stuff. What are you motherfuckers doing here? I don't recognize you, and you think you know where you're at, blah, blah, talking all this, just screaming. He looks like he's on something. And I knew all of the players around there, so I was surprised to see this cat. I didn't recognize him at all, who he was. And so, of course, I know I got some new tote bag here that I've got, plus an informant, or else I could try to do whatever I was going to do. If I needed, a drill, an eye socket, whatever. You can't think like that when you've got a backdrop of innocence, essentially, in this case. So I'm thinking, but I'm so helpless otherwise. You either trust that he's not going to pull the trigger, or you make your move depending on how advantageous a move it is. And so that's all that's running through my mind is I'm trying to tell this dude, hey man, we're here, we got business, tell him T's here, blah, blah, blah. Until finally the dude runs up to the door and says, man, put that shit down. And he's, this is T, man, I'm sorry, man. And apologizes, unlocks the door. And then we start stepping inside, and I'm thinking, man, this is a wild way to get greeted, And then the second we come in, the Hispanic guy, he starts giving the Hispanic guy a bunch of jab. So you Latin King wannabe motherfucker, what are you doing here, man? If you're not part of this crew, whatever, starts giving him that. And I'm thinking in the back of my mind, like, this dude's not just a Hispanic dude, you're giving him all kinds of tongue lashings and everything. Well, this fool pulls a piece from his pants that I didn't know he had, because again, it's my bad. Should have been searching everybody. I'm doing the deal, for heaven's sake. It's not like I got to search him for dope and tell him to go bank a buy. But I was so anxious to get this ball rolling, I let this fool come with us. He pulls a gun, shoves him up against the wall, and shoves the gun in his mouth. He's freaking bleeding all over the place. He drops the shotgun, so I immediately am keeping my head on a swivel and standing on the shotgun so no one can pick it up and use it. Meanwhile, I'm trying to look up. Well, this guy's screaming in Spanish. Tegan no comprende. But my buddy knows, my informant knew how to speak Spanish. They spoke to each other. And so it's a crazy scene, people screaming and yelling. This dude's like in a panic, and the guy's screaming like he's pissed, been disrespected. These people that thrive on ego more than cops do. His respect is what they demand for whatever reason, Finally, the dude decides to yank the gun out of his mouth. And of course, as you know, you're bleeding like crazy out of your mouth. This dude's run over the sink and spitting teeth and washing his mouth out. And I'm thinking, now we're really dead. My connect here has invited me to his home, and his guy's gotten his ass kicked. And it turns out that I said, man, B, I'm sorry, man, that this turned out like this, man. I wasn't expecting this to go south, babe, but what am I supposed to do? He said, man, T, don't sweat it, man. I'm gonna hit you in the morning. I said, well, I just need to get out of here. So why don't you take care of your guy and I'll just bail. And I was happy to just get out. No deal regardless. But at that point, I realized by the next day, certainly when he called, I realized I just established some street cred, because it's buffoonery. It's ridiculousness that happened. And it's irresponsible police work even that happened. But it was street cred because on a gangster level, it was gangster.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So
it was just
like,
ridiculous.
legit.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's what I would, it's kid shit.
Yeah.
That's just ridiculous, but it established me some footing there.
Yeah,
so,
but that's the currency there, right?
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
for sure. That's what I mean. You disrespect, you don't do it, and you show what you're willing to do and step over some lines. And then that was a way for me to step over a line without even trying. And it wasn't even me stepping over the line. It was just the fact that I was the one in control there, and was shoving both those fools back out the house. So,
what was the deal that you were supposed to do?
The deal was supposed to be for a kilo, and I had been buying samples on that police budget forever. I was just using my whole team's budget practically every week, and like I said, using the cash in odd stacks to make it look like I had tons of money. So after I'd been in about 7 or 8 months, I went to my sergeant and was like, man, I gotta start making real buys, or else these fools are just gonna think I'm
Fucking with them.
Yeah. So we started chopping feds at that time. Of course, I start with the DEA. They love the case. I break it down. This is what I got. This is my kingpin. I'm shooting for him, and I got this. So far, I've established this. I have these people connected. I've got hand-to-hands with all these people. And they're like, cool. We'll keep you posted on how this goes. We'd love to take this from you. And I'm like, no, that's not what I was looking for. I'm looking for resources, but, I've been doing this for 8 months. I don't want to hand it over to one of you buffoons either. So ATF didn't have they had resources in terms of money, but just really no manpower or anything that they could offer at that time. But the FBI had a special violent crimes and gang task force with an FBI agent assigned to the Fort Worth gang unit at the time. And they were just doing gang cases, and she was essentially adopting a lot of the cases that they would make, adopting them and taking them federal and prosecuting them on the federal level.
Yeah.
So when I went to her, they were like, hell yes, we want to play with this. And for me, it was good and bad. It was good because I didn't have to, play around with my sergeant. My sergeant now thought I was assigned to the FBI, which I was, but she was still finishing up a case for the next 45 days or so. She was in court and trying to finish up on this case. So she's assuming I'm supervised by my police people. And in the meantime, I'm like, I need 17.5. I got to, if I can pull this deal, blah, blah, blah. This is what okay. So I get, here's your 17 grand, and here's your Mercedes, and here's your Range Rover. It's got cameras in it that never did work, by the way. Again, it's 2007. So, this level of sophistication in the equipment was ridiculous. So it actually really helped me to move because I was really off the books, but I felt like now I'm funded. Yeah. You know, and
so
I'm showing
17.5 is what a key cost then?
Then, yeah, that was actually a really good deal for a white guy, actually, back then.
Really?
Yeah.
What would that translate to broken up and sold?
Shoot. Well, if you think of doubling it, I mean, you could sell, you'd sell $10 for a tenth of a gram.
Wow.
So, on the street, once you break it all the way down. So it turns into a lot of money when you break it down. So,
so at least double. So you're at least making your money back plus 100%. But
you're probably making more than that. Cause so by the time you sell it value wise, you're breaking it down. It costs you more to buy the smaller quantities than it does, hey, I want to buy a quarter of it, whatever. Then you're getting a bulk deal essentially. Cause they're not having to break it down and move it. So it works like anything else. You buy in bulk and you get a better deal. So by the time you break it down, you have those fools that are sitting on the corner all going into the woods to retrieve however many rocks you want to buy. I mean, they're selling them for $10 a piece. And then, you add that up and it comes out millions of dollars. It's ridiculous how you can break it down, but you got different people's hands in it. So I was essentially there. I was really empowered at that point. And not to mention that I was already on the cusp of becoming the guy, because at the beginning I'm leveraging other people that they could potentially recognize as an informant, to help me just kind of blend in as much as I could. But then, we're starting to make deals, and then other people are seeing that I'm the money guy, and my reputation then preceded me. So by then I have people seeking me out to try to do deals. And I'm the one saying, well, man, to be honest, man, you're not kind of on my level, but I can hook you up with somebody that'll be happy to do some work with you, man, or whatever. So, I was leveraging the dope that we discussed earlier, where that's a giant wheel spin, but every person that I was going to was a Crip, and they were associated through either selling guns or dope through this network that they had. And my kingpin was, $250,000 a week guy, and was still a local. I mean, he was actually saying, here's a $95,000 in cash, and handing it to his guy, this Mexican connection, who would drive off with it for an hour. I mean, it was like almost unheard of. You would never do that on a street level. You're buying an ounce or whatever. Like, well, here's my money. Go get it, and meet me in whatever. Yeah. Buy money, So these guys were just at a level to where there was enough business coming through that it was a massive operation. So the difficulty then became, how do you move from guy to guy? So I'm starting to make more and more cases, and I'm moving up the chain. I'm dealing with people that are dealing with bigger weights, but I had to find every excuse to say, okay, me and you have done a few deals. Now I need to go to him, but how do I move from there without, totally pissing you off?
Right.
So the second time that you're late means that I'm sitting in this neighborhood too long. And so that's when I would go to this guy. But the problem is, this guy's sort of your bro too. He's also a Crip. So that became my new issue, was trying to create more cases on Crips that were associated so directly, but still keeping the respect in the game, growing it up.
In Fort Worth at that time, were Crips the biggest player in town?
By far, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, were there? I'm assuming there were other gangs. I mean, were Bloods and Vice Lords? And
there were. Well, I don't know of any Vice Lords out there. There probably were, because every major city kind of dictates how everybody sets up camp. But Bloods, as they are nationwide, were a slightly smaller group, although it was closer to 50-50 in Fort Worth, just because it was kind of a dividing line, and there was plenty of area that they both kind of covered. Latin Kings and Mexican Mafia on different sides of town, sometimes intermingled, but not very often did we find Mexican gangs really crossing over a lot.
So what was the draw to the Crips in particular then?
The draw to the Crips was just that they happened to be in the area where, when I started doing those warrants, I started coming into a consciousness where I realized, wow, that's where this is connected. These people are bringing it in, and this guy's has 3 houses that he's supplying, and he's a Crip. So that's why I started making that connection. It was really just happenstance, really.
All right, so you start kind of moving up the chain slowly but surely. What was the biggest deal you ever did monetarily?
So this is what ended up being interesting, is I still had a limited budget when you think about it. If you're buying a key at 17.5, I can't just say, well, now I want to go buy 5 of them and just keep making these cases, because it's still one case and we're trying to include everybody. So you can't just go out and spend millions of dollars. It doesn't work that way. Well, there was a guy that was in a part of the neighborhood that was just outside the fishbowl, because by then I'm moving out of the fishbowl and into the areas where the suppliers are feeding the fishbowl, with the supplies. And this particular kid had grown up in the neighborhood and knew who I was, and he had just come into an inheritance. But he was one of those dudes that grew up in the neighborhood but was not like a big kingpin player kind of guy. And he was trying to get into the dope game, but he was just like a punk local guy. But he had all this money. And he was smart enough to know that these people are going to start ripping him left and right, because he's not that guy.
Yeah.
So we have a chat, and I was established to the point where we sat down and made a deal. He didn't know. I mean, he still thought I was T from the South Side, whatever. But so he says, "Look, I got this money and I need some protection." And I said, "Well, what's interesting is I'm trying to break in some better connections over here on this side of town. You seem to know people, so let me make you an offer." So I have people that protect me, and I literally did. I had guys who would sit in my car, pull out the piece that they had, and said, "Man, if anybody ever fucks with you, T, man, I got you. This and
these
this
are real guys. These
real
aren't
Crips,
cops.
yeah, real Crips, yeah." And so I said, "So I've got protectors, and as long as you're working with me, you're going to be safe." I said, "But I need a couple introductions, man. I just need to kind of make my way up, because I'm just trying to get, blow my business up." So what turned out to be was this cat would say, "T, I'm calling you, man. I'm about to go to D's house and I'm going to buy, 3 keys or whatever." I would call D and say, "Hey, man, take care of my boy. He's going to come pick up 3. And then he would go in and do these deals. It was a very creative borderline. It was a very gray area
Of entrapment.
Well, it's not entrapment. It's because this guy's going to go do the deal. But, what you can't do as a cop is take dope and then sell it to the street.
Right.
So what I was doing was facilitating it in a way that he was allowed to do free dope deals, essentially.
Right.
But when they knew that he was my guy and spending all that money, they kept him protected. They're like, "Okay, well, we got your back then. It's no problem. You're with T. We got it." And it made me look like I even had more money. And now the disadvantage was I couldn't make a case on every one of those buys. But again, that's fine, because I don't have the money to go spend, $50,000 on one deal to get one dude. I mean, it doesn't help me really. So it helped my street cred. It helped my, ability for other people to recognize that, okay, I haven't been blowing smoke this whole time. I really have some buying power. And then this dude was able to start introducing me to other guys. Like, "Man, you got to do some work with T." And then I'm continuing to move up the chain and out and branching out.
So with that, I guess chain of custody wise, if that's the right term, the ATF gives you 17.5, like you sign for
FBI,
it. Or
yeah.
FBI. You sign for it. Mm-hmm. What's to keep you from asking for 25 or 20 or whatever, and it only costs you 17 and pocketing the rest? Is there anything keeping you from doing that?
I suppose not under the circumstances, because again, we weren't recording it. So no, there wasn't. There was a lot of leeway given.
Yeah. And when you buy the actual product, you give them the money, you take the product, and then what happens to it? You take it back to the FBI and you give it to them. And
we're tagging it. We're tagging it in the evidence lab, and
it just stays put until a case is made.
Yeah, and so the other thing that I did, which was just my paranoia that turned out to be a super blessing, was I didn't keep any of my paperwork or anything in the narc office, nor did I keep it in the FBI. I had files of my own at home. I would put a case number on the evidence that I would turn in, but I wouldn't put a narrative down. I would keep the narrative in my own file at my house so that I had it, but the report was just basically a static thing. Here's the officer, time I turned it in, what it is, here's the report number, requesting analysis. And I had tons of deals like that were just turned in, and just because nobody essentially could know that I was connected with so-and-so, or this dope came from this part of the neighborhood. Nobody could track what I was doing, essentially.
Why was that a blessing?
it turned out to be a blessing because the reason in the beginning that we kept hitting dry holes and stuff was that one of the dudes that I was playing around with the fishbowl told me, hey, he said, where do you get your this and that? And I'm trying to remember how the conversation went to, I started saying, yeah, I'm catching some heat on the other side of town or whatever, just in part of conversation, talking about, my game away from there. And he's like, oh man, I got people that can take care of you like that, man. So-and-so does this dude's hair, and he works with the feds, and she does his hair. I mean, he gives her information and whatever she needs. And I'm like, oh, really? So, man, I'd be really interested in finding out how to protect myself on the other side of town through this kid, for this guy. This gets his hair cut. And it turns out it was a TFO, it was a task force officer that was a former police officer assigned to the DEA, who grew up in that neighborhood, knew a lot of those dudes, coached them in football and their kids and everything else, and was feeding information straight into their mouths.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so at that time I was like,
so you'd have gotten burnt huge if like you'd have probably gotten killed or possibly.
Depends on how long. Yeah. Depends on how soon that information would have come out. Yeah. You let me do a few months in there and tie up all those dudes. I mean, yeah, it'd be over, but it could have also just never launched because it could have been the first thing to come out too, is that somebody's trying to operate down there.
Yeah. I guess so back to the biggest deal you ever did. Were you buying multiple keys at some points with FBI money?
No, not with the FBI money.
Because I mean, to me, it's surprising because with the emphasis that our nation puts on the war on drugs and what we do at a federal level, like when you contrast it to say, all different types of military operations. I mean, there's times where our guys are carrying duffel bags with hundreds of thousands of dollars, or in some cases even millions of dollars.
Right.
And handing it off to fucking warlords for weapons or for, ammonium nitrate or to pay people off, or, and there's, you talk about a lack of fucking accountability. I mean, it's like there's pallets of fucking cash.
Yeah.
Dudes loading hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it's like you're struggling to get $17,500 for a key, and it's like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Like, why is there such a disparity there?
Well, first of all, it's the FBI, so that's kind of not their game. Yeah. They did have that task force set up, so that they could adopt cases, but they don't make a habit of spending a bunch of money on doing dope cases. And again, it was the focus on the gang was the deal, and it was kind of me and the FBI agent overseeing it. She had to kind of justify all this stuff along the way as well. So I didn't know what I could or couldn't do.
Yeah.
I was able to get a lot of the stuff, resources that I needed. But when I came across Pino, who was making all those buys, I thought, man, this is a perfect situation for me because, short of being able to get stuff and actually start distributing stuff around the hood, to prove myself, this is essentially the next best thing, is to allow him to go just do what he's automatically going to do anyway and spend not a dime, and it still allows me to be around. So I never really thought of it. I think it was a DEA maybe, and it was a dope case maybe, because then you're really focused in on the source and how we're going to get to the Mexican source that's bringing it across, and it's going to take more to get to that. So since it was a gang case, I just think there was less of an emphasis on how much can we buy, because if this guy's going to go buy 3 from you, then anytime that I'm around you, if I can get in the house and watch you do deals or do a smaller deal with you, I've wrapped that up.
Yeah.
I don't need to spend that money because he already done spend it, and because he did, now I'm in the room.
Right.
So that's
and
really
I suppose, not suppose. I mean, once that money is spent, it's gone too. I mean, so budget wise, it's not like you're getting that back.
Right. Yeah, it's gone. Yeah, you are spending it. It's not a flash. We have flashed a lot more money than that, but that's just, and I don't actually like doing that. Some people try to make a habit of doing that as part of their process. Man, want to see that you got the cash and everything, but I mean, that's begging somebody to rob you.
Yeah, no doubt. Did you ever end up busting this guy, the rich guy that was buying on your behalf, kind of? Like, did he get wrapped up in?
No.
Really?
No, he didn't.
Like intentionally or just by luck?
No, intentionally.
So it was kind of almost like a...
There were a couple of people that accidentally got left off the wrap up. Several of which I had made promises to other people to kind of take care of them. all the while they're working as a bad guy, not knowing who I am.
Yeah.
But on behalf of a family member or somebody that I was connected to, I was leveraging them to further my cause, but unbeknownst to them, and they managed to stay out of that too.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they all didn't end up going to jail anyway, but you know, the Pino's dead now. So, I mean, you know, you stay in the game, you stay in the game.
Yeah. So how did it kind of wrap up? When did the dominoes start to fall and everything kind of?
Yeah, that ended up wrapping up 2007 or 8, right around the transition period of time. It was.
So from a big picture standpoint, you're kind of making dozens of cases, like every buy, every exchange, every whatever, every deal that's done in front of you, you're saying, okay, this guy, you know, you've got this pile of 50 some guys basically.
Yeah. And then trying to connect them, you know, I got to get enough intel through these conversations and stuff to know that so-and-so works with so-and-so. And, you know, this guy's a 4-tray Crip, this guy's a 5-deuce Crip, but the source is actually the 5-deuce that's bringing it here. And the guys that are cutting it so you're spending a lot of time. I acted like a dumbass. I was ignorant to the gang thing, and my whole thing was dope kingpinging. So, you know, I'd go down in the middle of the Crip territory in a Steve Young jersey and just act like a fool, you know. And they'd be like, "T, what are you doing,
Who's
man?"
this
Like,
fucking guy?
What?
Yeah.
And they would give me the intel on, you know, this is why you don't do that, man. You're drawing attention because we're Crips and we're blah blah blah. Well, that's great. That's evidentiary to me.
Yeah. What is 4-tray and 5-deuce? Are those annotations in terms of streets where they're on, or
Streets in South Central where they originated.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're cross streets there.
Oh, I got you.
52nd Street, 43rd Street, they're down there, and then you know most of the criminal gangs that are infamous and that are widespread came through the prison systems. You know, you get put in prison somewhere and you release, and then you're out. That started in Chicago or L.A., New York, all that kind of stuff.
So would 43rd Street and 52nd Street guys not get along?
Historically, I really don't know how organized they were when they really started.
I mean, I guess as it relates to the guys you dealt with.
No, yes and no. It made it interesting because it's a lot more crude. They were very organized in some way, and they were very ignorant in other ways. So yes, they were sort of rivals. There were times where they fought a little bit, but there were also the kingpin was a uniter, which is almost the most dangerous kind because, like anything, you know, in cop work or military work, if everybody actually would cooperate against you, we'd be in bad shape.
Yeah.
So he was just about the Crip culture, and this is what we stand for. We're really protecting our neighborhoods and everything, you know, all that kind of crap. And unified those guys. In fact, as we began to wrap this up, and I knew I was wrapping it up because the U.S. attorney told me, I'm cutting this off. You have 2 more weeks, but we're done, like, sending you out. I had no control over it at that point. They were making cases. The U.S. attorney's going to accept so many. And my kingpin had fled to L.A. and was laying low because he was catching some heat. It wasn't necessarily me. I don't know where his sources were from, but this dude was real estate agent, car lot owner, had houses all over the place, and he was my $250,000 a week guy. So I had to wrap this dude up, and he had it was 4-tray day, which is on April 3rd, whatever, 4-3, and he came back and made his appearance just before that so that they could put that together, and he of course goes to the city and gets a permit and, you know, rents the park out. And so that was the last hurrah. I grabbed an informant of mine, and we went down.
Like a mafia funeral.
Yes, yes,
it
is.
One spot,
it really is. It would be shooting fish in a barrel, you know, at the time, and that's why I just thought, man. So I spent all day cruising through that park, and the few who didn't know me I was going through that whole process again, cruising through there and just getting to know people, shooting the breeze, and then trying to figure out where my guy was, so we could just take one last shot at a deal. And so all day long, we're out there playing pickup basketball and, you know, stopping at barbecues and just cruising. It's a large park, but it was just up and down. And some of the neighboring areas, they had a basketball court and a big apartment complex that was kind of between where the park bordered the fishbowl. And that's where some basketball was going on. We managed to find him over there. And ironically, by the time we were able to actually corner him and figure out where he was at and sitting there, my informant had to talk sense into me because he was like, T, you are way too big to try to score from this guy because obviously we're not going to spend $1 million here. But the chance of a lifetime was only that this dude doesn't carry ever. This dude doesn't touch the stuff. But on this particular day, these guys were having such a festive time that I could see stuff passing through all over the place, and they were just kind of hooking each other up and this and that. So my informant went out there and played the same game that we did in the beginning, which is like, man, T's just trying to help me out, man. Could you just, can you help a brother out? I'm just trying to get my game, blah, blah, blah. It's an honor to see you back in town, and blah. Give him that a big old spiel. And watched him do a little hand-to-hand with him, and I thought, this is really anticlimactic in terms of T making the big hand-to-hand, and it's a giant load of stuff, and you take the kingpin down, but you're tying him into the thing, at that point. And I had just gotten too big to come up and say, hey, I want to do some big-ass deal on a day where we're having a barbecue. So we ended up tying that in on that particular day, and then had 51 people total. And then was time for the roundup, which was the worst part because, a lot of these cats were really bad dudes. And a lot of these cats I found out are just dudes that had really bad upbringing, that they were good dudes otherwise. We talk about who's going to win the Cowboy game or talk smack about playing Madden or...
Did you play basketball with them sometimes?
I didn't actually play pickup ball or anything with him. No,
it's like fucking white men can't jump over here.
We tried to get in that. We tried to get in the game to when I found out he was playing, but I was standing there trying to get in next, but that didn't end up panning out. Yeah. But it was really kind of traumatic because first of all, by then I was doing 18 months undercover, so it'd been a long time. By then I knew a lot of these guys a lot more than I expected. I knew which ones, and there was more than a handful that I thought had social redeeming value. I really thought, man, this guy will just testify and share information. I'll testify on his behalf to try to get his, the little amount of time as possible because I know this guy's got character and he's tied into this big conspiracy. Everyone's going to get the massive hammer equally. And so it's the only thing I control was that. And it was really traumatic. My wife is one of the most loving, caring people. And what little that we would actually talk about, was a lot about the people that I really didn't admire, but really were endearing to me. I really like this kid, man. I hate to see him gonna go down in this. And so I kind of found myself rooting for some people. We ended up gathering 200 and some law enforcement officers, federal, state, local, into a big giant gymnasium and said, we're 6 a.m. We're going to be rounding up all these people. And it was interesting because, I'd done I like being in the front of the stick and doing all that jazz. But this thing was an old school operation because they still had landline phones. They had a long table in the F.B.I. office. It's actually in the FAA building, I think, but it was this long table with landline phones lined up in front of each chair, all these whiteboards with photographs of all the guys and what teams were going after these people and everything. And, all the planning, we'd been up for 24 hours the night before. We're getting all the warrants signed and prepping all this stuff. So it was very much an admin position for me at that point. It was an interesting perspective. And to watch it all go down, and then literally once they just give the green light and these teams start hitting these houses, it was like it reminded me of the stock floor, stock market floor, just total crazy chaos. Stuff. People handing over paper, or they found so and so, but he's run into this, or we're going to be checking this, and they'd say, so we got so and so, we're putting X's on names and what other stuff they got, and there's all these people working, and to me it was just surreal. Yeah. So because I was more of just kind of there to lead the situation.
So you weren't in on any of the door kicking at that point. Yeah. Man, so discretion wise, were you in a position, maybe you don't even want to say, I don't know, but like, here's the list of guys, here's the tie-ins, whatever, like for the guys that you thought had redeeming qualities, were there any that you were like, man, take him off the list?
You mean take him off the list in terms of just, you mean prosecuting at all? Not other than just
I mean, would you even have the ability to do that?
No, I didn't have the discretion. And, like I said, it was all out of my hands. I made cases on everybody other than the ones that I had kind of those little side deals with where it was just, and also I have to deal with the fact that there's so much happened off the books. I had to be really discerning about what was reported. Some of these guys are like, man, I'm going to go do 30 years in prison for, 29 grams of crack. I'm like, that's not the case, but that's on paper, but exactly what's happening here, So I really didn't. Now I did have a chance. Only 7 went to trial, and 4 of them, I actually took the stand on their behalf as a character witness for the defense.
7 total or 7?
7 total.
Out of the 50 some?
Yeah. Cause man, once you debrief these guys and they find out that they're in because they did a hand to hand with me. I mean, the only thing you can argue is my character at that point. I mean, some of the attorneys will just tackle that and try to see if they could make me into a crook or whatever. But I mean, it was kind of an open shut deal. Some of them would cooperate, and it was interesting to be on the other side of the table. Now it's FBI agent and me sitting in a prison across the table from these guys that I've been playing around with for over a year.
Man, how was that?
Dude, that was one of the more crazy experiences of the whole thing. Like I said, it was traumatic being done with it just because it'd been what I'd lived for so long, and then knowing that we're wrapping this up, and then the feeling of having to go into that room and now I'm somebody else. I got a wide range of responses from pound sand, dude, I ain't talking, can't believe you, I trusted you, that kind of thing, which was expected a little bit, to otherwise when, they would, she would say, who do you get your stuff from, blah, blah, blah. And he'd say, man, I don't really play around with that. I deal with so-and-so. And she'd say, we know differently. And he'd say, it's not true. T, tell her, T, and he was pleading to me because I'm still the T he knows. And then that's also like, dude, it's still heartbreaking. I'm somebody else, but it's interesting to see that some of them were immediately like turned off and pissed. And the other ones were just couldn't let go of the fact that I know you're somebody else, but I'm like, and I have to explain, well, dude, I'm on the other side of the table, but I really want to implore to you how important it is now to testify. I can't blame the people who wouldn't testify or give information. But, in my mind, it's frustrating because I know absolutely that it's going to help them. Yeah. But I also know they don't trust me now. So,
well, I think the other thing too is, if you project and put yourself in their shoes, you're like, unless it's completely negating a sentence and put you in witness protection, like, I don't care. I'd be like, I don't care how much it reduces. I still have to go do it, and I got to face the fucking music. There's no way I'm fucking ratting on anybody.
Right. Well, and that's true. In their minds too, you've got that. And some of them though, you're looking at the difference between 13 and 30. I mean, so when you really comes down to it.
Yeah, I guess my take. I'm not in that world, but it's like, well, 13 is going to be 6 months, and I'm going to be fucking.
Not in the feds.
Bleeding out of my, no?
Oh, you mean 6 months before somebody
you get fucking killed in prison for being a rat. I mean,
yeah. That's absolutely something to consider. It's a really bad position to be in.
It's a lose-lose for sure.
And I think that when we got the most cooperation was when I took the stand the first time on someone's behalf and actually said, look, they did what they did, but I, spent enough time with them where I really feel like they can contribute to society. I think they're a good person. They need to rehabilitate, but I think, sending them to prison for 25 years is a bad idea. Yeah. And when I'm the undercover doing that and they realized that I was actually going to follow through on that, several of them started coming forward. And ultimately, that's the worst part about it, is that you can hold out as long as you want, but by the time you get to the end of it, everybody's talked about something. Because when you're talking about 51 different people that are already connected, if you're the last one to talk, then you kind of have nothing. We got murder cases solved. We had like 9 cold cases that were like, saying, Momo's got, 10 keys in his closet. It's like, nobody cares about dope, dude. Yeah. What else you got? And he's like, well, I know so-and-so murdered that dude at the Stop and Shop. It's like, okay, let's talk, Yeah.
Man, that's intense. It'd be a lot of emotion going.
It was really emotional because, like I said, I'm a softie anyway. And like I said, I don't purport myself to be a badass or whatever. I knew it was an important thing to do. The neighborhood turned around in very short order. All the houses were bulldozed and rebuilt, and the neighborhood's in a lot better shape. There's still crime, but it's nothing like it was. Yeah. But it was really super traumatic, and it ultimately led to, when we do those debriefs, you find out, some of these dudes have 3 kids within the same year, and they're like, middle name, I can't remember how we spell it, but it was, the ignorance was just through the roof. And you ask about some of the worst scenarios. That's like the worst case scenario. So when all this stuff came out and the media's blitzed and everybody's doing all these news conferences and stuff, of course, I'm not getting any of the attention, but somebody nominated me for something, and then it came out who I was. And then people are clamoring to somebody, do you need to write a book about this? I'm like, nah, it wasn't the purpose. And, it just seems like puffing at that point. Until we finished the debrief and realized that 104 kids are now left out of those 51 people that don't have a father. So I'm like, okay, how do we like frame this? So there's a particular organization that we started with that actually feeds into that neighborhood, the actual neighborhood, that mentors children. It's an after school. They mentor the kids in all those different aspects that I told you about. And I said, that's a reason to write a book. Because, growing up being a creative and a musician and whatever, I know writing a book or writing a tune don't make you rich. They make some people rich, but
fraction of a percentage.
Yeah, you're a little bit, you write a book for a really good reason, and that's what we do. We donate all the profits to those organizations. So
that's really cool.
I'm about 10K in the hole on my book. I don't make squat, but I feel like that was my contribution to bringing attention to the fact that this isn't about Batman went and conquered all the Crips. This is about discovering that this is only like this little piece of the problem in this giant cyclical violent thing that happens in these neighborhoods. Otherwise you got to train up some undercovers to go 18 years later and do it again. That just seems like a giant waste.
Sounds like the U.S. military in other countries. That's what that sounds like.
that you would know. You would know, certainly.
Was that kind of the end? Was that the end of your law enforcement career as it relates to that stuff? Did you do things after that, or was that?
Yeah, I tried to stay. Per my wife, she was like, "Look, just hang in there and try." I put together through the chief's office, tried to put together a little task force of people, because since I'd done this flippantly and on my own, I thought, man, if I had a team of 8 people that could actually support me, and now that I know how this works, we could make a killing doing this again. And so I did some treks to South Texas, and we were doing Mexican mafia deals where they were shipping guns in some shipments with a bunch of sheet metal and construction supplies through Freeport. And I was buying guns and stuff on the other side of town. And I did that for a few months until I realized that everybody wants to have a finger screw in all the stuff you do. I didn't have that anonymous long rope to just go out and play and do what I needed to do. And I thought, I can't do this. Plus, this is not going to last with, people. And I understand now, owning a company, I completely understand the amount of libel that you're taking on by being rogue. You're not doing it, to be some kind of badass, but you just can't accomplish things with, going up a chain of command at every step. It just doesn't work that way. So I stayed for about another year, and then that's when I got assigned to the cold case unit. I stayed on for another year there too, and enjoyed that experience working under those guys. And then just decided to jump off and start a company.
Before we get into the cold case stuff, I am curious. What level of paranoia existed then and still continues for you, being that guy and still living around here or around there? And like any retribution or vengeance, is that? A
lot of it happened during the arrests, and it was a lot of family members and, people, because they were still, I'm innocent and I'm caught up in this mess. And so I have this still to this day, I have the same phone number. So I want to know where they're coming from if they're threats, you know what I mean? So I've even had people call me on it over the past couple of years that now see what I'm doing with that whole operation, that it's not a self-serving thing. It was doing my job, and now we're even trying to help even more. So now I even have some of the exact people who sent me death threats are calling and asking if I can help their kid because they're in trouble.
Wow.
That's badass.
That's incredible.
I don't know if everybody feels that way because not everybody's going to call me. And, a lot of these fools are getting out now because it's been a long time now. And I don't poke the bear either. I am I'm still trying to get one of them out, actually, that got really screwed during the prosecution phase.
Yeah.
So I do talk to the ones who are wanting to talk, but I don't poke bears, and I'm obviously security conscious, but as you would know, you can only do so much and you can protect yourself from non-sophisticated criminals. But if somebody's sophisticated and really skilled, I mean, if you wanted to kill me, I could do all the shit that I wanted to, but I ain't going to last long.
Well, I guess the thing that would make me, or I guess assume that it would be the worst in that regard is when you start talking about the mafia, Mexican mafia and arms stuff. Like, those dudes are pretty sophisticated, pretty dedicated, have a lot of reach.
Yeah.
I know you didn't do that for very long, but.
Yeah, and I didn't even really end up filing a bunch of cases on those either. I kind of left a little bit, I wouldn't say pissed, but I was really, really frustrated to the point where I was like, you can adopt these cases if you want, some of the ATF or whatever. I don't think we even, of the buys we made, I don't think really made a lot.
Right.
I was in a really frustrated period. I was, look, after doing that year and a half of just 80-hour weeks and just having to live through that anyway, I just think my brain was fried.
Yeah.
And knowing how good I'd gotten at doing what I did and knowing that there's no way it's not sustainable, that I just, I was at a point in my life where it's just, I wasn't ready to finish it out. So,
right.
So that part didn't end up in any really threats because really nobody really got done.
Yeah. I do have a note that you were on an episode of Cops while standing in front of the camera as your undercover persona.
Yes. Jumping to the climax of that particular story, it was one of those deals where I told you at a certain point people are chasing me down wanting to do business with T.
Yeah.
And I just picked up my informant from a corner store, and he usually just kind of give me the lowdown from the street since I'd been there. I'd gone to bed. What happened last night? Is there anything I need to know about? Blah, blah, blah. And we're just cruising around. This gold Lexus is kind of starting to follow me. So I freaking turn around. I got my piece up by the doors, ready for whatever, roll the windows down. And this dude's like, T, hey man, you remember me? I was there when you did that deal with so-and-so, whatever. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going on. He's like, man, I got this product in, man. I just really want to do some business with you, man. I think you really be able to move this stuff, give me the whole spiel. So I just look over to my informant who knows that I'm looking for Crips. And at first I tell him no, because again, I said, I got people that I can send you to. And he's like, man, no, just, come on, man. I just really want to do it. And, when my informant says, man, this dude's claiming and whatever, it's like, okay, well, we're not doing anything else. You don't have anything to tell me. So I said, well, where are we headed? And he said, man, it was just right around the block. He wasn't even going to give me the big rigmarole because he was just wanting to take me to right to his spot and do the deal anyway. And it is the typical house as I described before, just same kind of layout. Only, when you go through it's a little 4-foot chain link, which doesn't do much, but it's still a deterrent in terms of getting in or out. And they got a chain link on that, and you're letting yourself through burglar bar doors, and then the deadbolts and everything's getting locked behind you. And then you find yourself in that locked box again with these fools, which by that time I was getting a little more used to because I'd prepared for a lot of things. And you would know this also better than I. You prepare for as many situations as you possibly can so you have the brain power to improvise. You'd rather choose between A, B, and C than A through Y.
Yeah.
So I thought of all kinds of scenarios and, getting robbed and they want to pat me down. They want me to do whatever. I practice all that stuff. We walk in this house, though. We got the giant screen TV over here, little couch and a coffee table with a gaming console, some baggies, some dope and a couple guns laying out. And I just position myself in front of the TV and those guys sit on the couch and he starts giving me the wheel and the spiel about whatever he's got. And then I hear a familiar voice that just immediately, what's interesting is it sent me into the adrenaline dump. I got that SNS activation immediately where I'm tunnel vision, my audio exclusion and everything before I even knew what was going on. So when that happens, usually it's, in almost every other instance, it was when I knew somebody was going to shoot at me or they wanted to fight or whatever. You get that, but it hit me before I recognized the voice behind me, which was this exact ugly mug on a giant ass screen TV from an episode of Cops that I was on several years back. And even in the book, I did the worst job of actually describing it because the book is legit. I mean, I took memorialized notes on napkins in the car and everything, made them look like snot rags so I'd remember things that just were interesting things. But man, I don't have a clue what I talked about, but I know I talked fast and long, and that 8-minute segment seemed to be 30 minutes long as I was just yap, and kind of walking around and moving around. Like, I don't know if they'd seen this or what. I'm just assuming that they did. And I just hurried this deal through, send my informant to the door. I'm keeping this Crip kind of in front of me so that I'm in a tactical position as they're going to the door. And we're let out, and I get in the car, and I look over at my informant, and he's looking at me all quizzically like, T, what's the matter with you?
So they didn't notice?
Didn't notice.
So just so that I'm understanding it completely correct, is that there was a drug deal going down inside of a drug house with you involved.
Yeah.
And on the TV in that room,
on a big screen,
is you as a cop on an episode of Cops, and they didn't notice.
They didn't notice.
Dude.
And what makes it's 1 in a million, but in today's day, it would be 1 in a trillion.
Yeah.
But, you got to realize back then, there's still like 4 main channels and a UHF and whatever. And these fools watched, and Cops was also super, super popular. Yeah. And they came to Fort Worth a lot. Wow. I was only on it because my sergeant made me go. I mean, I didn't even volunteer for that.
What was the episode of Cops? What were you doing where you were on air for it?
I was arresting some dude on the freeway for dope.
Did any of them know that now?
Oh, absolutely know it now. Yeah, absolutely. There's the stuff that we found out after. I mean, some of these guys I arrested, I realized that I had actually, like, one dude that I dealt with a lot down in the fishbowl was a dude that on a call I was sent to the parole office because he was going to get a revocation. They needed an officer to stop by and transport him to the jail. Yeah. So I showed up in my police car. I didn't recognize him. He didn't recognize me. It's the one genius thing about being in a uniform is that you're in a uniform. It's almost like that's what they see. They don't really.
You're a faceless uniform.
Kind of are.
Yeah. Wow.
And thank goodness.
Man, that's fucking nuts.
It was. That was that's the one time when you say, where were you the most scared? That was by far it.
Yeah.
It wasn't even, guns a-blazing. But I was so ill prepared.
Yeah.
And the next 6 months following that, I was really worried about who else has seen this. Am I going to walk into the next house and they've seen it, but I don't know they've seen it, Made it nutso.
Man, that's fucking wild. Incredible. All right, so the last couple of years that you were with Fort Worth Police Department, you did some cold case stuff. Can you kind of synopsize the gist of that?
Yeah, it was, it's kind of an unheralded appearance and departure, really. There was one guy assigned, and there's a lot of fairly decent-sized departments really don't even have a team or a unit that just kind of go back, especially with DNA being out so long. I'm surprised that they don't just assign even civilians, just go through every single case and pull DNA, and because they're finding a reasonable amount of innocent folks. But you can also solve a bunch of murders that way. So I actually found a dude. There was my case that was assigned. I ended up figuring out that there was this. I'm trying to remember the year 1980. Maybe it was a case from 1980. The guy was stabbed like 72 times.
Wow.
And I managed to do a little surveillance on some of his family and some family members that were associated with his roommate at the time. And then I felt like I had located potentially the murderer in Ohio, and that it was just a matter of trying to pinpoint where he was at that time and figure it out. And we said, we just came up with some ruse about, you have some back payment that's due, from Arizona back in 1980 and blah, blah, blah. And of course he's like, man, I wasn't even in Arizona in 1980. I was in Fort Worth, Texas in 1980. I was like, oh, okay, we must have the wrong dude. And in reality, you have the right dude. So and
that's fucking tricky.
Yeah,
I like it.
Well, that's part of, that's the beauty of being a creative in that business. Cause really that's just kind of the way I think. Sometimes I think too hard about things that should just go get them. But
you fuck your wife like that too, don't you?
There's no tricking her.
Yeah.
No. She knows me all too well, nor would I even try. She's allowed me to marry up that far. I just
that's like
do what she says.
Instead of asking where you want to go to dinner, say, we're going to your favorite restaurant. Guess where we're going?
I don't care.
If she says, I don't care. If you say, we're going to your favorite place. Guess where it is? And then she tells you, like, yep, that's it. That's where we're going.
Well, it's usually called I don't care.
Yeah.
That's the worst part.
Yeah.
But yeah, the anticlimactic part is that there was so little movement to even get it going. I had cops on standby up there, and my whole thing was, fly me up there, let me grab a rental and drive this fool back. And I don't know if they ever went and got him.
Wow.
I mean, it's just,
is it a resource
slow
thing?
moving and
Is it a resource thing, or they just don't give a fuck?
I think they didn't give a fuck.
Wow.
That's
pretty disheartening.
Yeah, and it again, that was the beginning of the end of that whole thing, and then the new culture coming in. These were old school guys that were in there. Some of the new school. Look, there's great cops out there, and we need a lot more really great ones. But it's headed in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
But that was telling. And I only got crossways with one supervisor during my whole stint there, and it was just a dude that was just so supercharged with ego. And like I said, I'm passive. I'm never disrespectful. I had good friends that were my sergeant and whatever, and I would just tell them, hey, discipline me, do what you need to do. I have a respect for your position. I'm not going to be your buddy and whatever. But this guy got crossways with me, and he ended up being the acting assistant chief for like a month period of time, and saw me in there with my goatee that I'd left over from my undercover work, which, for guys like me, I mean, you got a handsome beard. Well, this is 6 months of work here for me. This face.
You know what's weird about that? Like, my face looked like it was covered in fucking fruit mold if I didn't shave for a month until I was about 35, 36 years old. And then literally overnight, all of a sudden it would fucking grow. Like, it was really weird.
So you hit puberty late.
I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've had the deeper voice since I was 16, but it's fucking really odd. Anyway, not to derail it, but he
was just an ass, and was wanting to give me a suspension or give me the boot out of the unit or whatever. And that's when I was just like, man, I got to go.
Yeah.
You're gonna get onto me for something like that for what I've accomplished, and I'm here working my ass off. And so that was time to bail. I'd been thinking about bailing anyway. Like, so my wife talked me into sticking around a little bit just to make sure I didn't want to promote or something, and I didn't have any desire to do anything.
Yeah. What you're doing now with the, focusing on the youth with incarcerated parents is incredible. We'll talk a little bit about that before we wrap up, but I'd love to get your take on, having been so kind of balls deep in undercover work and really on the front lines of the gang and drug and violence issues that a lot of our country's big cities face, probably all of them. Mm-hmm. I am curious to get your take on kind of, from a political standpoint, a big picture standpoint, what the approach is. One question you asked on some of the Patreon extra footage was, if Trump's going to designate.
Yeah.
I hope he doesn't nominate any cartel. Maybe he will.
I nominate him as a terrorist.
Yeah, the new fucking FDA is a cartel member. But designating them as terrorist organizations, if I'm supportive of it or not or whatever, I'm curious to get your take on, like, if you really kind of elevate to that 30,000 foot view standpoint, not just the war on drugs in terms of what's the way to fight it. To me, one of the other or broader questions is it worth it? Should we do it? Which drugs should we go after? How hard do you go after it? Because to me, those are equally as important. It reminds me of the question that Jeff Goldblum actually asks in Jurassic Park of, when they're talking about bringing dinosaurs back. And he says, as a species, we got so wrapped up in whether or not we could or couldn't do this as a technology, we never stopped to think whether or not we should.
Why are we doing it at all?
And to me, there is a part of that. If you think about how long the war on drugs has been taking place, how many people have been murdered from it, how much money it's cost, how much manpower has been spent attacking that vice, other problems that our country faces.
Yeah.
I do think it begs the question. I'm not saying that drugs are good and everything should be legal and there should be, no fucking left or right flank or guardrails with that. But I do think you have to ask those questions because, at some point you have to say, okay, well, this isn't fucking working.
Yep.
Right. Clearly, like, there's no shortage of drugs in this problem. All of them shy of weed. our federal felonies nationwide, and yet you or I with a few $100s in our pocket and a couple hours of spare time in any fucking town, even not just a city, could score whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah.
So obviously what we've been doing isn't a big enough deterrent. So, to me, the question is then, of the A and B option, do you go harder or do you reinvent the methodology in which we're trying to solve the problem through a totally different mechanism?
Yeah, I think it's hard to wipe the slate, and that's what we've dealt with, because this is another example of things that have been politicized. I mean, these are platforms for which people have put forth their best effort and then can only get a certain amount of things done because of a neighboring country or, before NAFTA, after NAFTA. And hell, in 1970, it was a federal offense to have little bits of weed, and dudes were doing 20 years. So that's a perfect example of, you're looking at addiction and suicide rates and mental health issues and everything else that are on the rise, and the dope is still, contributing as much as it has been. I see both of those angles, because, when you bring this up to somebody who's lost a kid to an overdose or something, the consideration is nil. I mean, it gives 0% chance that we should reconsider legalizing this or that or the other, or just, giving a prescription level this. There's always going to be a black market, whatever the arguments are. But until you give it a shot, then you're going insane, because we are spinning our wheels. People are dying. We've got wars on the border. We've got all kinds of other things that this contributes, I think, to a bigger problem, which again is that black market. And if it's not a black market that's this big, is it going to be something that it's easier for us to battle, because this is regulated now and blah, blah, blah. And if you're not doing that, then you can get hard on those folks and then possibly eradicate it. And it's speculation, but I saw that exact thing. I said, like I said, if you work really hard and you do the best that you can, things won't get worse. Yeah. And we've been doing that since the Reagan administration.
I mean, really, even before that. I mean, I know he was the first president to take the hard line with it, but before, again, on the Patreon stuff, you asked me what I think about Trump. Can you re-ask that question?
Yeah. And what are your thoughts on Trump designating the cartels as a terrorist organization and essentially leveraging the U.S. military to combat them?
Yeah. The short answer is I'm not sure. And the reason I say that is that I'm not opposed to it necessarily. But that's one of those things where if I really take a step back and before I just kind of default to the like AA personality, special operations, slap your dick on the counter, ego-based, like, yeah, let's go fuck these guys up kind of thing, is think, okay, before we do that, is there a smarter way to accomplish, what is the goal, right? The goal is to stop massive amounts of fucking illegal narcotics streaming across the border completely unfettered, if you will. Okay, so is that the smartest way to accomplish that, is to say, okay, we're going to designate these guys as terrorist groups, and now we're going to use American special operations and the full brunt of all of our nation's intelligence agencies, our SIGINT, our COMINT, our HUMINT, the full brunt of the way that we would attack ISIS or Al-Qaeda or whoever overseas, is we're going to put that same kind of pressure on them. I would ask, okay, well, first, from a success standpoint and replicating success is look at what the current threats are from a terrorist standpoint. Look at the amount of money, manpower, resources that we've put into fighting terrorism. Now, have we defeated it in some ways? Yes. If you look at from a global standpoint, like, have we stifled that methodology at all? I don't think so. You could argue we've made it worse. So to me, like, that's a big strike in the con column for defaulting or starting out with that as an option. I wouldn't remove that from the table. I'm certainly not scared to do that, but you do have to realize the fucking mess that's going to come out of that, because those guys aren't chumps. They're at least as well funded, if not considerably better funded than terrorist organizations, right? They're also a lot closer. We're not talking about, thousands.
That's a great point.
Yeah, You're not talking about thousands of miles of ocean separating us, where it's way harder for ISIS, well, they can come to Mexico and walk across at this point, and I know a lot of them have in the last 4 years. That's another topic we can discuss. But to me, again, it's like the Sun Tzu art of war is that you got to know your fucking enemy, know what they're capable of, and so to me, like doing that as a step one, I think is akin to trying to mop up the floor of a bathroom where the toilet's overflowing while the toilet is still overflowing. It's the same analogy I would use with trying to debate, immigration policy when the border is wide open. I think step one is you got to close the fucking border. I think before we really attack making, as impenetrable of a border as we can possibly make, even having that discussion is a waste of fucking time, because while that's open, if you attack them, right, it's like fucking cockroaches. You look at Afghanistan-Pakistan border as a classic example. What happened? Well, they went to Pakistan. What's going to happen? You start attacking them there. Where do you think they're going to go?
They just keep, they're
going to fucking come here.
Right.
And they're going to come here and they're going to bring the fight. You're going to see fucking congressmen getting assassinated. You're going to see their kids getting fucking kidnapped. You're going to see all kinds of gnarly shit
don't play by the rules.
Yeah, that I'm not sure that this country's ready for.
I certainly think not.
And to think that we have the ability to just go there and completely mop the floor with everybody, I think is an arrogant and dangerous perspective. Again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't keep that option on the table, but I think until we put enough resources on the border to say we legitimately have a handle on this and can keep, people from coming across at will, it's a waste of an argument, and it would be a waste of I would rather see U.S. military resources be put on the border, frankly, and close it and absolutely and actually shut it down before you even have that conversation. At that same time, I would put a similar amount of resources into finding the bad actors that are currently in this country and getting rid of them. I don't think it makes sense to try to round up everybody who's here illegally, because there's tens of millions of people that fall into that category. And I think you got to prioritize in the same way an ER doctor would triage a bus crash, is that you got to say who are the people we're most worried about. Unfortunately, we don't even know who the fuck those people are.
That's the problem. How are you going to confiscate all the guns?
Trying to sift through, there are people that we do know are here, who are here illegally, who are convicted fucking horrible criminals. I think you go after them first. That's the logical step. And so, to me, it's like, let's focus on those two things first. And I would also use negotiation as a power tool also, and that I would, like, if I was Trump, I would contact not just the Mexican president. I mean, I would find a way to reach out to cartel leadership and say, look, we can fucking go this route if you guys want. It's going to be bad for both of us. Or you guys can fucking police your own and stop bringing shit across, but it's not going to fucking pan out, and try to figure out a way to at least, communicate, some sort of warning that way of saying, like, look, we don't want to go this fucking route, but you have to realize, like, the actions that your organizations are doing are killing more of our citizens than wars, than terrorism, than fucking, a lot of other things that people tend to focus on more than drug streaming across the board. I mean, when there's six figures, 100,000 people overdosing annually on fucking drugs, like, I mean, that is a natural catastrophe. That's bigger than, if you look at the hurricane damage and the wildfire damage, and, there's not even close to those kinds of numbers of American citizens dying from it. So you've got to figure out a way to try to, kind of threaten, that walking with a big stick of saying, like, look, again, we can go down this road if you want, but it's going to be fucking bloody, and we won't stop if you don't fucking, stay at it. So I think I would do those things first.
I love the idea of sitting down and having that conversation, even with the Mexican president and the cartel leaders. And
because it's not like they're not in bed together. I mean,
right. Well, and that's the other part of the problem is I think there's so much money in federal funding for programs, for everything else, that, undoing a lot of that has been the conspiratorial claim anyway. And I damn sure guarantee you that it's making Mexico a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, and I think, like, again, putting yourself in the shoes of the cartels, like, I mean, I think that's important, is that you can be one-sided, but you're gonna probably lose if you just look at it from our perspective. Like, if I'm one of those guys and the U.S. government says, hey, you need to knock this shit off, I'm like, why?
Right.
What's my motivation to
It's
stop
what
doing
they do.
it?
I mean, it's not like they go take the secondary job out.
So to me, the best, I mean, I do think it's still important to communicate that to them so that they know, like, hey, we're not fucking around. Like, we're going to warn you and say, like, look, here's the deal. But to me, putting pressure on Mexico as a country, as a government, of saying, if you guys don't actively at least try to stop it, and it's very obvious that you guys are putting in a lot of effort, and I know it sucks for you guys because
It definitely does.
it's a rock and a hard place, but tough shit. Like, you've let your country get to this point. Like, that's not our problem. It's your fucking problem, but we're going to make it our problem if you don't do something. And I would use, trade imbalances and, find ways to incentivize them and basically force them, to at least tackle the problem to the best of their ability. And I know it would suck, but to me, it's kind of like layers of an onion. There's not one solution. I see, people saying, "Oh, just designate them as terrorist group and fucking, send Delta Force after them." And it's like, I don't think that that's going to solve the fucking problem.
Well, it doesn't eradicate the trade. That's the problem.
Yeah, the
you
demand
get rid of
is
Escobar,
there.
and then is that the end of the cocaine trade? Well,
yeah, I mean,
no.
you cut the head off and another, 5 more grow back. So yeah, I mean, like, I think that perpetuates combative operations with our southern neighbor, which is not desirable. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think you've got to take a multi-step approach, but again, until you shut the border down, I don't think really any of it matters because, it doesn't matter. Like, even if you completely defeated them or decimated them to a point where they were retreating, like, where are they going to retreat to? Here.
Right.
Or at a minimum, like, they have the ability to, if you're putting pressure on them there, to come here. And I think nobody wants that, so
that definitely would worsen it.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to just shut the fucking border down. Like, it doesn't seem that complicated to me, but anyway, it's kind of a long tail on that kite answer.
Well, no, I think it's a terrific answer. And like I said, it's just been the politics and the money that's coming in and out of both countries based on that. But if you have somebody that's dedicated to doing that, I think that's a great place to start. And you could at least make some progress in different areas and maybe pivot from there and figure out. Yeah. I don't know what you negotiate with people that are going to do it regardless, because that's kind of where we're at. Yeah.
I mean, I guess maybe negotiate isn't even the right word. It's more of a the same way, when Reagan came into office and, basically, I mean, fuck, Trump's already done it for that matter. I was going to use Reagan and Libya as an example, but, Trump's done it with, I mean, look, Hamas and Israel signed a peace treaty today, as a matter of fact, and when the day after Trump got elected, you look at a lot of these things, I mean, that was one of the first things they said is like, hey, we're ready to negotiate now. Like, the second he gets elected, like, that tells you a lot. Yeah. So, by kind of carrying that big stick and saying, like, hey, we'll give you a chance to fucking not have to, for both of us to have to fucking bloody ourselves, but if it comes to that, we will absolutely fucking do it. And unlike the current administration, we will take the fucking gloves off and we will come at you with every fucking thing our government has, including airstrikes. When you start talking about we're moving away from law enforcement to the full brunt of the U.S. military, that's a whole different fucking ballgame. So to me, that's another thing from a negotiating tool with Mexico. Like, hey, we get that you're a sovereign nation, but with what you're allowing to come into our country right now, we will start fucking bombing the shit out of your country if you don't fix it. So pick one.
Right.
You can either go after the cartel and try to police your own, or you can expect F-18s to be bombing the fucking dog shit out of your country for the next fucking 2 years.
And that may be literally the big stick that we're talking about anyway. Just the fact that you're going to leverage the designation in the first place doesn't mean that that's when you send troops. Yeah. That just means now the designation exists, and now you have a little bit more negotiating power. Maybe that's where they're leaning, but I appreciate that. Yeah,
I mean, it's a tough scenario all the way around. But going back to kind of the impact of drugs, I guess from your standpoint, I'm curious. The general deterrents. We talk about a lot of the different factors that contribute to why people, either get addicted or get involved or whatever. And we've covered that in depth, but I am curious, do you think that from a deterrent standpoint? Is there a way to deter it to a degree with which it would actually cut the problem out, or do you think, figuring out a way
Drug use, you mean, in general? Man, I don't, other than I do agree with trying some more significant moves in different directions.
Yeah.
I saw Oregon, taking steps to legalize a lot of different drugs and then pour a lot of the drug combating money into rehab facilities and mental health facilities where people can get proper diagnoses if their drug problem is a result of something else. I mean, I think a lot of it is, the drug problem is so out of control that we're just trying to keep up with helping the people that are half killing themselves in the first place. So I see some merit in that, but again, it's easy for me to say.
Yeah.
I've talked to people that have, again, lost kids over addiction, and it's also difficult to find really good rehab facilities for the same reason that the prisons are overcrowded. There's still political money in and out of those places that make it really hard to eradicate a bad system.
Yeah.
You've got to come in with something. But I do think we need to pretend there's a clean slate and figure out a different approach, because obviously not getting these kids are taking fentanyl on purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, I have those conversations like, how can you take a chance, that something's was cut when they're like, well, I already know it is. I mean, it's good shit. That's why we buy it. And I'm like, wow, that's completely wacko to me. But I'm the old man. Yeah. And these are young kids wanting to just try stuff. And
so I guess the big question that I would ask for you is, for the average listener out there that's, even if they're in law enforcement, whatever, they're a parent, they're a community member, like what do you think your average citizen can do to help the problem? Like, what do you think the most impactful singular action is for a listener to say, help the drug problem in this country?
I think either a mentorship for any one group or even one child, or contributing to a reputable entity that does things like that, whether it's a full housing facility or a boys and girls club. I mean, those are, like you said, they're little dents, but the more we draw more attention to that, or take someone under our wing, there's lots of people that feel like they've made it in life and they want to contribute, to society. And there's some really simple ways to just mentor kids and show them different ways, because you don't know what they're thinking. Especially at my age, it's difficult for me to get into a sixth grader's mind until you sit down and have those conversations, and you just have open conversation about it. And you can be the nerd and hear what their life's about and what they think. And
15 minutes on TikTok will give you a pretty good idea what's inside that motherfucker's mind.
Yeah, but again, after that, I still don't know. That's my point.
Still don't get it. I do think that parenting and school is a big component that I think the Department of Education has gone so far off the rails with standardized testing and just kind of backwards. Not litmus, but standards for what it takes to graduate and move from
study
one
for
grade
the
to
test
the next.
and move on.
Yeah. I really think, and this is probably sounds extreme, but to me, extreme problems oftentimes require extreme solutions. I think schooling is one of the biggest problems in this country. Our education, our public education system is arguably the biggest contributing negative factor to the drug problem, in that it's so big. And if you look at, big public high schools that have, north of 2,000 students, it's a lot like a fucking prison, in terms of what you can get, what you're exposed to, what's coming in and out of there, like the cliques, the culture, what takes place. I mean, it's obviously not at nearly that extreme level, but kind of the way that it goes down is very similar to that. And to me, going back to like, say 150, 200 years ago, when it was like, this gal in the neighborhood is the teacher and these are the 15 kids in the neighborhood that she teaches. Honestly, that and homeschooling, I think, would serve this country really, really well to transform and get back to where most kids are educated that way.
I do think along those same lines that the parents are unaware at which age to address certain issues, because I think it's younger and younger and younger.
Yeah,
when we grew up, if you got to talk at all, it was, embarrassing, but you kind of already knew about some of the stuff that they're
it was like
informing you.
8th grade, 9th grade.
Yeah.
Now it's like 3rd graders are watching porn, and it's like, what the fuck?
Right. And you better talk about suicide. You better talk about mental health and stresses and different. They just are completely different people with completely different circumstances that we can't pretend to understand when they. And so it is the parents' responsibility. When you talk specifically about parents that have children, obviously that's where it would have to start. But even people that don't have kids of their own, even to just quote unquote adopt, well, not literally, but adopting some kids and having those open conversations and just letting them express themselves. That's where you really kind of learn where things need to go, as opposed to waiting generationally. That waiting period is going to shrink and shrink and shrink.
Well, I think, going back to the last full book that you read, that groupthink, the psychology behind why people do what they do, and how masses are funneled into making decisions culturally, I think really is the crux of the problem, is that in schools, the suicide, the peer pressure, the reason why kids do really dumb shit is, I think, exactly that, is that there's so many fucking kids that, like, there's this funneling of stupidity, that's concentrated, that there's too many kids to be able to regulate it. And so now if you divide these 2,000 kids into groups of 30, where they're only around a small group of other kids led by a neighborhood where, say a neighborhood of 50 houses, all the kids, go to one spot, and they're taught by somebody who lives in the neighborhood. Like there's none of that shit.
Yeah.
None of it, and so to me, like, I don't know how you would even go about trying to accomplish that. But to me, it would take something like that to really revolutionize and completely hit the reset button on the American public education system.
Yeah, and it's interesting because even one of the examples that they use in the book, and I'll misrepresent it poorly, so forgive me for those that have read it, because it's a fantastic book. I think you'd get a lot out of it too. Is they talked about a particular neighborhood, I think it was in Pennsylvania, where it was very wealthy, but it was a neighborhood within the city. That neighborhood was producing all these Ivy League kids generationally, and they just had all these straight A students and blah, blah, blah. And it was becoming an anomaly in and of itself. And all the parents were successful. And then the parents' kids grow up and they all move back to this neighborhood. It becomes this cultural phenomenon until they had some kids that would underperform. I mean, you make a B in something, it's like a giant ass deal in this neighborhood. And then they started having suicide issues with these kids. And then within that, I don't know, with that square mile of whatever that neighborhood was, there were tons of suicides happening over and over and over. And they were all in that same neighborhood. And that was the same tipping point that got them into this, was the same thing that, it only lasts for so long. And they all go to that same school, but those are the ultra performers. And it watched how the trajectory of the dynamic in that neighborhood changed, and the expectations now changed. And then each generation has even higher expectations, and what the consequences of that are. So it's also a cautionary tale in terms of making smaller classes and stuff too. It could also go just as bad, even though I tend to still totally agree with you that if you're not stuck in the masses. And how many kids now have more of a problem with anxiety than before?
Yeah.
Where I had anxiety as a kid. My son has terrible anxiety, and I'd rather go to a smaller class and not be made to go stand up and do a big project in front. I just want to go in there and learn and get out of there.
Yeah.
And that environment doesn't exist. You want to go to college and all that kind of stuff, you better be prepared to do public speaking and presentations, everything else. And I think that also is driving people away from the system. And I think the smaller of a group you get, the more success you'll see in terms of education, at least.
No, I agree. And I think, dovetailing onto that point is what's being taught also, like, I think it needs to get back to communication, i.e. English, literature, history, arithmetic, science, and then life skills. Like, again, if you're in a small community school, like learning basics of farming, home economics, sewing, fucking plumbing, like basic life shit that because as soon as you start combining physical activities that you're learning, you're contributing to society, your community, that breeds purpose, and when, just like with adults, when kids have purpose, they're happy. When adults have purpose, they're happy. When they don't, they're fucking depressed.
Yeah.
So I again, like, it's
productive ways to spend your time.
Yeah. It's way easier said than done, but I would love to see a shift.
Yeah. Like that shift only is going to take, one city in a major state to start shifting that direction. Yeah. I still see a lot of, private schools doing that kind of thing, but I think it's absolutely necessary and a great idea. We've always had, options like that in our schools growing up, where you could take an elective and do whatever.
Shop and fucking auto mechanics.
Yeah, but you do need to get people involved. That's what the purpose of PE was, to get people doing certain things and be active. But this would be more focused, I think, on life skills and everything, and teach proper history too. I mean, we're still teaching stuff that has already been proven to not even be true. We're still just teaching it anyway because we've taught it for 50 years.
Yeah, it's crazy. Patreon question. Claire asks, regarding living, balancing a double life, how did you manage your ultimate relationship with truth?
My wife was absolutely my rock during that period of time. She, she has lots of questions, very curious, and we have we spend 24/7 together. So I could refrain from saying certain things, but she also would keep me in check. And I had several moments where I don't want to make it like the typical, oh, you lose yourself and whatever, but you tend to kind of lose yourself, because especially in my disposition where I was acting more like my own self, only with that one little pocket of differentiation, then your lane and neutral just seems to be grayed out a little bit, in terms of how you talk and the way you act, and certainly within your relationships. But I think in terms of my relationship with truth and, staying true to who I am was easier with my wife there, and staying true to the mission itself was knowing that this is necessary. And the trepidation was still valuable because it just means that I'm human and I feel for these people, but it's still necessary to do. And I feel, more accomplished that it led me to discover what else that we can possibly do, and I can contribute to that also.
Yeah.
So it was always mission based. It just, it kind of, you change as you get in and learn like anything else, but it's always about salvaging that neighborhood. These people were held hostage by these fools. And you can't just say, well, man, y'all need to move out of that neighborhood. They're poor. They can't just up and move. They've been there for 3 generations.
Yeah.
Why don't you get rid of these 22-year-old fools?
Yeah. Did you talk differently, like to try to fit in? Like, did you have like a fucking ghetto accent or anything?
Yeah,
can we hear it?
I did, but not like intentionally. I think, you just kind of, you pick up some lingo and stuff hanging out with these guys for a long time. And, reading the book for the audio book, I feel, foolish trying to act out stuff like that. But yeah, it was enough to where I could land verbiage and stuff. But at the time, it was interesting because leading up to that period of time, cops and military, fucking this and fucking whatever. Yeah. And I was getting to the point where like, I need to change my habits, because if I say the F word, then it means nothing, so I was just I got to get out of my bad habits. So I was actually on a streak leading up to that, just trying not to curse so much and just cut down. And I made that kind of a part of my personality.
Oh, really?
So, and a lot of people don't believe me, but I'm in there saying, oh man, that's a bunch of crap and whatever. It sounds like, I'm a nerd. I'm obviously, I'm not faking it. So, but nobody ever questioned me. It's not like I would never, blurt out a cuss word, but it was one of the things that allowed me to hang on to myself through all that, just thinking this is like one of the things that I'm trying to do. And this isn't going to stop me from, developing myself, further.
Yeah. That's awesome. What haven't I asked you that I should have?
And I think we've covered a lot of the operation. Obviously, the main thing is I don't live my life based on, that heroic time or whatever you want to consider it. I think there's always something new to be looking forward to.
Yeah. And
you got to take a lesson forward, because in the same year you retired is the same year I also retired, and then started a company and tried to figure out new ways. When you do military work or you do police work, inherently you can feel rest assured that you're doing something dignified and for the better good every day you go to work.
Yeah.
But when you move on past that, you have to seek out ways that you can contribute to, whether it's one person's life or it's your kids or it's somebody else's kids, or if it's a, you know, an organization or something where you can, you know, leave your stamp on something besides your own, you know, storytelling ability. And so that's really what I think, you know, the mission in life is just about finding opportunities to help other people and help them create a journey that's going to be successful, you know, based on the things that you've learned through your journeys, you know?
Yeah. No, I love it. I think it's an amazing takeaway from all of that. And I think it rings true in, you know, first responders, veterans, you know, similar communities to such a high degree that everybody's forced to reinvent themselves and figure out what's next, you know. Coming back full circle to music, last question is if you could only listen to one album for the rest of your life.
Man, I can't even, you know, ask the question about even your favorite style of music. I'm like, well, can I name 3? Your favorite band? Can I name 10? Man, a single album. Like if it's so many albums that are great. And hopefully you got an older listening audience. They're like, what's an album?
Yeah.
There used to be a lot of character in albums when, you know, everything from, you know, Peter Frampton Comes Alive, you feel like, you know, you're in the audience, or Cheap Trick used to do live records and stuff like that. Or Rush used to put out records that were anthologies, but told long stories. Yeah. You know, we mentioned Led Zeppelin. I mean, even then, like, how do you even pick one Led Zeppelin record? I mean, I almost can't do it. And I even, you know, when I went to study music, I studied jazz. So, I mean, my styles of music and breadth of taste is so wide that, man, I think I would honestly go nuts listening to one album. Even if I loved it, it would make me nuts just knowing what I'm missing. Yeah. I hate to not answer it, but I don't think I could give you an honest answer. I really don't.
No, I mean, it's your answer, right?
It's a great question. I would need time to think about it. And even then I'd probably change my mind as soon as I said it.
Yeah. For me, if I had to pick, I think I would go with Metallica's And Justice for All, I think.
Yep.
Maybe their Black Album, but probably And Justice for All. I think it's just a little heavier, but, and I mean,
that's when they hit the scene.
Yeah.
That's when they really came of age.
Yeah. I mean, Ride the Lightning and Kill 'Em All, phenomenal albums, but to me, where they really fucking
refined it.
Yeah, just I guess brought the style that I appreciate and enjoy the most. It's those 2 albums, I think.
Yeah. And in that vein, Pantera was, you know, if you go that way, then
Vulgar Display of Power is right up there.
Kind of can't beat that one, right? And it was just such a unique thing for the time when everything was hair metal and they just came out and punched you in the mouth.
Yeah, phenomenal shit. I saw them in concert twice, which was awesome.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh, you're lucky.
Yeah, at their height. I got some parting gifts here, and one of them, I'm going to toss this to you. Oh, sorry. Shitty throw. Just a standard challenge coin, but this next one, especially given your law enforcement career of combating Crips, there's I'll see if you can pick up the theme, is that I wanted to present you, thanks to John Johnson and Champion Choice Silver, because you were combating the Crips. I wanted to have a buckle that was significant towards that.
Freaking love it. Mic drop.
With the blue.
Got the blue and the trim, of course, and even the gold, that counts.
Yeah, so
I love it. So I'll go out and I'll fit right in again.
Perfect.
And if they try to shoot me, this will stop it.
There you go. You got the Back to the Future 3.
And thank you. I'm honored. Thank you for the gift. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming. I appreciate all the work that you've done, your willingness to share the story, and even more importantly, continuing to put so much effort into the next generations and really helping America's youth. That's super important, and my hat's off to you.
Well, hats off to you too. It's an honor to be here. Like I said, thank you for letting me share time with you.
No, thank you. Appreciate it. For the listener, hope you guys enjoyed it. I know I sure did. Fascinating story, and I just want to say thank you to everybody for tuning in show after show. If not for your support, we wouldn't be able to bring you amazing guests such as Tegan. So Thank you. Keep up the good work. Hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, you can choke yourself. And until next time, this is Mic Drop.